The needle would not settle, and Corin had never in his life seen a needle refuse. He stood at the low rail of the reading gallery with all four hands folded against his sternum, watching the master gauge climb through a band of the dial that the old cartographers had painted red and then, above the red, had left blank, because nothing was supposed to reach it. The blank arc had no numbers. There had been no need. In 9,000 mapped species, in the whole long patient history of the Orith Sanctorum, no songline had ever climbed high enough to want a number up there. The humans had passed the last painted mark 40 breaths ago and kept going. "Draw it down," said Prime Cartographer Valith Dross, without turning from the cradle. Her voice was the flat, unbothered instrument Corin had trained under for 6 years, the voice that had never once been wrong in his hearing. "The induction is loose. Tighten the second harmonic and draw the reading down into the register." Corin's fingers moved before his thought did. That was the training, the body knowing the console. And he tightened the second harmonic and drew, and the needle did not come down. It shivered against the blank arc like a thing straining at a leash, and then it climbed another degree into the unmarked white, and a low sound came up out of the induction rig, not a sound the rig was built to make. "Prime," Corin said, "it isn't drawing." "Then you have tightened the wrong harmonic." He had not. He knew he had not, the way a man knows his own hand, but he tightened it again because she had told him to, and the reading climbed, and the low sound in the rig thickened until he felt it in the roots of his teeth, in the fine bones behind his frosted eyes, in the shared underhum of the weave that connected him to every coromer in the room, and past them, thin and far, to the whole networked mind of his people scattered across the arm of the galaxy. The weave did not like the sound. He felt that too. He felt the distant lattice of his kind flinch, the way a still pond flinches when something heavy goes into the water on the far shore. On the cradle the human breathed. That was the part Corin could not stop watching. He was junior, the most junior cartographer cleared for a deep map, 3 seasons past his apprentice bands, and he was not supposed to be watching the specimen. He was supposed to watch his console, but the specimen breathed, slow and even in and out, through a mouth that had not been fitted with a muzzle for because the recovery team had logged it low priority, and its eyes were open, and it was looking at the ceiling of the reading chamber with an expression Corin had no entry for in any of his catalogues. It was not afraid. Corin had mapped fear 10,000 times. Fear had a shape in the induction, a fast, bright scatter, and this was not that. It was not rage, which was slower and hotter and left scorch marks in the harmonics. It was something low and level and enormously patient, a thing that had decided a very long time ago that it was going to keep breathing no matter what the room did to it, and had simply not revisited the decision since. The human turned its head a small degree against the cradle's cowl and found Corin with its eyes. Corin looked back down at his console. His hands had gone still on the harmonic keys, and he did not remember telling them to. "The specimen is drifting," Valith said. "Sedation is holding at the 3rd tier. Corin, why is my apprentice staring at a biped instead of his instruments?" "The sedation is holding," Corin said. It was true. 3 tiers of it, enough to still the nervous system of anything they had ever put in the cradle, enough to drop a warcast brood of the ossuary conquered into a mapping sleep, so deep its songline came off it clean and slack as a cut ribbon. 3 tiers, and the human was awake. Its songline was not slack. Its songline was standing straight up off it like the hair on a body pulled through a charge, and it was climbing. "Then draw it down." He drew it down. It went up. Later, much later, when he was one of the few coromer alive who could still bear to remember that day in order, Corin would place the beginning exactly there. Not at the moment the signal went out, which was the moment the whole galaxy remembered, but at the moment before, when a young cartographer with steady hands drew a reading down and it climbed instead, and a prime cartographer who had never been wrong decided, in the flat, unbothered voice, that the instrument was at fault. Valith turned from the cradle at last. In the cyan wash of the daylight panels, the Orith Sanctorum kept the reading chambers bright, always, bright as a noon sky over a shallow sea, because the founders had believed that the mapping of a mind was a holy and clean act, and holiness wanted light. Her narrow body threw 4 thin shadows across the floor plates, one from each arm. She crossed to Corin's console and set 2 of her hands on the rail beside his and read his gauges herself, and Corin watched her frosted eyes track up the dial, into the red, into the blank white above the red where no cartographer had ever needed to look. He watched the exact instant her certainty met the needle. She did not gasp. She was Valeth Dras. She had mapped the death song of the undersung and lived. She had put her hands into the induction of things that ate their own young, and she did not gasp. But the fine translucent membrane along the side of her throat, the one Corimer could not consciously control, drew tight and went pale, and Corin, networked to her, dimly, through the weave, felt the small cold spike of a thing he had never once felt off his prime. He felt her not understand. "What is its provenance?" she said quietly. Corin called the recovery log. It came up thin. Unmapped biped. Recovered from a debris field at the 9th marker 16 days past. Single hull survey craft, catastrophic decompression, 1 occupant living. The recovery cast logged it as fauna-adjacent, tool-using, low technological ceiling, no known conquered affiliation. He hesitated. It was queued as a routine catalog entry, a common map. That is why it came to a junior chamber. "A common map," Valeth repeated. On the cradle, the human said something. The chamber's translation lattice was set for the conquered tongues and the 11 client languages of the Orith sphere. It was not set for whatever the human spoke, and so what came through the air was first the raw sound of the human voice, low, rough, dry from 16 days of the station's air, and then, a beat behind, the lattice's stammering guess. The raw sound came first, and Corin would remember the raw sound. Then the guess, "You keep asking my body a question. It keeps giving you the same answer." Valeth did not look at it. It is delirious. The 3rd tier of sedation induces vocalization in some fauna. She straightened all 4 arms. Increase to the 4th tier. Collapse the harmonic gate. We will take the reading by force and file it as an anomaly and be done. I have a mapping of the vein succession to conduct at the next bell, and I will not spend it on a biped from a debris field. Prime. Corin kept his voice level. The weave carried tone whether you wanted it to or not, and he did not want his to carry. The 4th tier is rated to stop a heart. Any heart. If I collapse the harmonic gate on a songline that is already above the register, the induction will have nowhere to shed the overflow. Protocol says. I know what protocol says. I wrote 4 of its clauses. She was already moving back toward the cradle, unhurried, her long pale fingers finding the sedation manifold by memory. Protocol also says a songline cannot exceed the 9th threshold, and there is a needle in my chamber calling protocol a liar. When the map is wrong, Corin, you do not consult the map. You correct the world. He should have refused. He told himself that for a long time afterward in the quiet, and it was true and it was also a lie, because there had never in the history of the Corimer been an apprentice who refused a prime in the chamber, and there was no shape in him for the refusing. So he did not refuse. He collapsed the harmonic gate. And the Orith Sanctorum, and Corin, and prime cartographer Valeth Dras, and the human on the cradle whose name none of them had thought to ask, learned together what happens when you take a deathworld's nervous system, wire it to the oldest and widest instrument your civilization has ever built, and squeeze. The overflow had nowhere to shed, so it shed everywhere. Corin felt it go out through him first, because he was closest to the console, and it was not pain he could have filed. It was the sudden unbearable sense of being a very small aperture through which something enormous had decided to pass. It went out through him and into the weave, and the weave, which was built to carry the tame catalogued songs of 9,000 map species from station to station across the whole Coromor sphere, so that no map need ever be made twice. The weave took it, because that was what the weave did. It took songs and carried them. It could no more refuse a song than a river can refuse rain, and it carried the human out. Not the human's body. The human's body stayed on the cradle, breathing. The human's song. It went to the sister station at Belloc first, because Belloc was nearest on the relay, and Corin flat on the floor of the reading gallery now, all four hands pressed to the plates, the daylight panels flickering above him like a sky with something wrong in it. Felt Belloc receive it, 140 cartographers a system away, and he felt them all, in the same instant, stop. Then it went past Belloc. It went to Meriwether and to the Sift at Kelvantry, and to the deep archive at Ossuar, where the master copies of every songline ever mapped were kept in cold and silence. And it did not stop there either, because the induction gate was still collapsed, and Valeth's hands had frozen on the manifold, and no one in the bright chamber, was drawing anything down. It went out along the litany relay, the great patient broadcast spine that the Coromor had strung across the arm of the galaxy over 900 years, the spine that carried the litany, the sung catalogue of all known life, the map of every mind, the single greatest work of Corin's people and their gift and their trade and their pride. Every client civilization in the Oreth sphere kept a litany receiver tuned to that spine, to hear the newest maps, to know what had been catalogued, to know what was safe and what was not. 11 client species in the near sphere, 40 in the far, and behind them along the same ancient frequencies, listening the way old things listen, quiet, patient, unadmitted powers that the Coromor did not have clients' names for. Powers that had been alive when the first songline was sung and had chosen, for reasons the litany did not record, to be counted among the dead. All of them had their receivers tuned to the spine. And onto the spine, raw, unfiled, uncollapsed, at a volume the register had no numbers for, went the song of a nervous system that had grown up on a world that tried to kill it every hour of every day, and had answered by refusing, for 400,000 years, one animal at a time, to die. Corin lay on the floor of the bright chamber, and felt the galaxy hear a human being for the first time. He would spend the rest of his life trying to describe the sound to people who had not been on the spine that day, and he would always fail, because it had not been a sound. But the nearest he ever came was this. It was the sound of something small that would not stop, not a roar. A roar ends. This did not have the shape of a thing that ends. Under the raw, overwhelming climb of it there was a rhythm, slow and level and horribly patient, in and out, in and out. And Corin realized, lying on the plates with the daylight stuttering, that the rhythm was the human breathing, that the whole impossible signal was riding on the back of one biped's calm, steady, sedation-defying breath, and that every mind on the spine from Belloc to the deep dark was now feeling that breath go in and go out and go in. The daylight panel steadied. The low sound in the rig died back. The needle, with nothing more to give, sank slowly out of the blank white through the red, and came to rest, trembling but resting, in the high catalogued band where the death songs of apex predators lived. It had shed the overflow. The gate had done what Valeth demanded. They had their reading. Corin got his hands under himself and rose slowly, and looked at the master gauge, and then he looked at the small board along the console's edge that no one ever watched, the relay status board, the little row of indicators that told a chamber whether its induction was correctly isolated from the litany spine, whether the sacred broadcast frequencies were sealed off from the working instruments the way 900 years of protocol demanded they be sealed. The isolation indicator was dark. It had been dark, Corin understood, with a slow cold drop in the floor of his mind, for the whole map. The recovery cast had queued a low-priority biped to a junior chamber, and somewhere in the routine of it, a seal had never been set. An isolation had never been thrown, And no one had watched the little dartboard, because in 9,000 maps the little dartboard had never once mattered. Because in 9,000 maps, no songline had ever had the strength to climb up out of a working instrument, find an unsealed door, and walk out onto the spine of the whole civilization. Prime, Corin said. His voice did not sound like his own. The relay isolation was never set. Valeth Dras stood over the cradle with both upper hands still frozen on the manifold, and she did not answer him because she was looking at the human, and the human was looking back at her, awake through 4 tiers of sedation, and the human said the raw sound first, then the lattice's stammer. There it goes. It did not sound triumphant. Corin would hold onto that too in the years after, when it mattered very much what the human had and had not felt in that moment. It did not sound triumphant. It sounded tired and a little sorry, the way a person sounds when a thing they have been dreading has finally, quietly happened, and there is nothing left to do about it but watch. There it goes, the human said again, softer, to the bright ceiling. I told you it kept giving you the same answer. The first reply came back up the spine 11 minutes later. Corin logged the exact interval, because logging was what he had instead of composure. 11 minutes, the time for the signal to reach Belloc, for Belloc's 140 cartographers to stop being stopped, to understand what had crossed their receivers, to refuse to believe it, to check again, and to do the thing that no sister station had done to the Orath Sanctorum in the whole tenure of Valeth Dras, to open an emergency inquiry on the master channel and demand, without the courtesies, in the bare imperative of the weave, an answer. What did you just transmit? It came into the chamber as text on the master board and as a pressure in the weave, and Corin felt the pressure carry the tone Belloc could not keep out of it, the same tone he had felt off Valeth an hour before, the small cold spike of a mind that has met a thing it cannot file. Valeth took her hands off the manifold. She crossed to the master board. She stood in the cyan daylight with her 4 thin shadows, and she read Belloc's demand, and Corin watched his prime, who had never been wrong, who had corrected the world when the map disagreed with it, reach for the reply key with a hand that was not entirely steady, and stop, because she did not have an answer to give. There was no entry for this. She had spent her life inside the greatest catalogue of minds that had ever existed, and it did not have an entry for the thing that had just happened in her chamber, and Corin saw her understand that the way he had felt the human understand the room, all at once, and quietly, and without any way to ununderstand it. Seal the chamber, she said. Sever the relay. Physically cut the spine feed at the trunk. Do not trust the isolation. It has already lied to us once. She was moving now fast, all 4 arms working, and the flat instrument of her voice had a hairline crack in it that only someone who had trained under her for 6 years would have heard. Sedate the specimen to the 5th tier. I do not care what it is rated to stop. I want that songline off the spine and back in the register where it belongs before Belloc's demand reaches the deep archive, before it reaches the clients, before. Prime, Corin said. Before the far sphere hears a conquered instrument broadcasting an uncatalogued apex song at a volume that will read, to every receiver from here to the silent line, as a declaration. Prime, Corin was looking at the master board. Below Belloc's demand, 3 more inquiry channels had opened while Valeth spoke, Meriwether, Kelvantry. And a 4th, from a bearing the board could not resolve to any station in the Corimer sphere, a bearing that pointed out past the far archive, past the last client world, into the old dark where the powers that counted themselves dead kept their tuned and silent receivers. It has already reached them. The human, on the cradle in the bright and holy light, closed its eyes and breathed, and out along the spine of the galaxy. The breath went with it, in and out, carrying to 40 listening civilizations, and to the older things behind them the single steady message that a small, stubborn animal from a world with no name in the litany had been trying, all along, to give. Still here. They cut the spine feed of the trunk. Corin did it himself, because Valeth would not trust the isolation, and the trunk cut was a physical act. A hand on an ancient brass and crystal lever in the relay vault 2 decks down, and the lever wanted the strength of all 4 arms to throw. He threw it. He felt the great patient spine of his people's broadcast go dead under his hands, the way a held breath goes dead, and he came back up to the reading chamber expecting silence. The song was still on the spine. He stood in the doorway and felt it, thinner now, robbed of the induction rig that had first flung it out, but not gone, not fading. It had gone out into the weave, a full and living thing, and the weave was not one wire you could cut at a trunk. The weave was every Coromer mind lashed to every other, a lattice 900 years in the weaving, and the song had found the lattice, and the lattice was carrying it now the way a struck bell carries a note long after the hammer is put down. Belloc's 140 minds had heard it and could not now unhear it, and each of those minds was a node, and each node touched a dozen more, and the song rode the touching outward on its own, needing no relay, needing nothing from the Oraeth Sanctorum at all. "It doesn't need the machine anymore," Corin said. "We gave it the machine long enough to get into the weave. Now the weave is the machine." Valeth stood at the master board. 9 inquiry channels were open on it. She did not turn. "Then we quiet the weave." "You cannot quiet the weave. The weave is us." "Then we quiet us." And she said it flat, the old instrument, and Corin understood that his prime was now contemplating things that were not in any protocol she had written, that she was standing in the bright chamber doing the arithmetic of how many Coromer minds you would have to still, and how, to break a note that a stubborn animal's breathing had struck across the lattice of an entire people. He understood that she had not decided against it. He understood that she was only stopped, for the moment, by not knowing the number. On the cradle the human coughed. It was a small human sound, wet and tired, and it did more to the chamber than all 9 inquiry channels, because both cartographers turned to it at once. And for a moment the greatest crisis in the history of the litany was a young biped clearing 16 days of station air out of its chest. "Water," the human said when the coughing let it. The lattice caught the word this time. It had heard enough of the human now to begin to learn it. "You've had me 16 days. You can map the inside of my spine, but you can't figure out water." "It is dehydrated," Corin said. The recovery cast logged its intake requirements as he checked. They logged it as pending. No one filed the requirements. It has had condensate off the cradle's cowl. Nothing else. "It is a specimen," Valeth said. "It is dying of thirst on your cradle while it broadcasts across the arm of the galaxy," Corin said. And the words were out of him before the weave could warn him what tone they carried. And they carried a great deal. And Valeth's throat membrane drew tight, and for the first time in 6 years Corin had said a thing to his prime that he could not take back. She looked at him for a long moment in the cyan light. "Water," she said, "and a muzzle, if it can speak it can bite. And then, Corin, you will go to the relay vault and you will begin logging every reply that comes up the dead spine and the live weave both, because the choir will convene within the hour. And when the first voice asks me what my chamber has done to the litany, I intend to answer with a record and not with an apology." She turned back to the board. "Go." He brought the water first. He was not proud of the order. A prime had given him 2 tasks, and he had done the small mammal kindness one before the great civilizational one. But he brought the water first, in a shallow catch basin held in his 2 lower hands, and he tilted it to the human's mouth because the cradle held its arms, and he watched a creature that had been calmly broadcasting terror to 40 civilizations drink like any thirsting thing, greedy and grateful, throat working. And when it had drunk, it looked up at him out of the frosted glassless strangeness of its wet dark eyes and said, in a voice the lattice now rendered nearly clean, "Thanks, what's your name?" No specimen had ever asked Corin's name. In 9,000 maps, in 6 years of chambers, not one songline on the cradle had ever wanted the name of the mind that mapped it. The question landed in him somewhere the training had not reinforced. "Coron," he said. "Cade," said the human. "Cade Ferris, in case anybody's writing it down." He let his head fall back against the cowl, exhausted, and closed his eyes, and the breath went slow and level again, in and out, and somewhere on the far spine, a civilization that had been holding its own breath for an hour felt the human steady again and did not know why that was worse. "You seem all right, Coron. For a guy who's been asking my nervous system riddles for 2 weeks. The other one, she's the boss. She is the prime cartographer. She is the finest mapper of minds the Aurath Sanctorum has produced in a century." "Yeah," Cade said, eyes still closed. "She's got that look. My first dive supervisor had that look. Never wrong right up until the day the pressure was different than the chart said, and then he was just a guy in a suit like the rest of us, 40 kilometers down, finding out." He breathed. "Water's good. Thanks, Coron." Coron did not put the muzzle on him. He told himself, going down to the relay vault, that it was because the human was too weak to bite, which was true, and because a muzzled specimen could not report its own physiological state, which was also true and was also not why. He went down to the vault and he sat at the long-dead trunk lever, and he began, as his prime had ordered, to log the replies. And the replies were what finally taught Coron the size of the thing his hands had done. The clients heard it before the choir convened. That was the part the later histories always got wrong. They told it as though the coroner had held some grave internal council and then, gravely, informed the galaxy. It was not so. The spine was broadcast. The clients had their receivers on it always. The song had gone out to Belloc and the Deep Archive, and to the 11 near clients and the 40 far ones, all in the same 11-minute wavefront, and the coroner learned what they had done at the same instant as everyone else, from the replies. The ossuary conquered replied first among the clients. The ossuary were the warcast breeders of the near sphere, a proud reptilian people of green-scaled brutes and long grudges, and they kept a litany receiver in every war hall, because they liked to know which songs on the catalogue belonged to things that could kill them, so that they could avoid those things, or, in their long, slow way, prepare to become the kind of thing that killed those things instead. The ossuary had catalogue entries for 9,000 species and a war doctrine for each. Coron had mapped an ossuary warcast champion himself, 2 seasons past, a slack, easy map, the champion asleep and proud in the cradle, and its death song coming off it clean. The ossuary reply was 4 words. It came in the war tongue, and the lattice rendered it, and Coron read it 3 times. "What have you loosed? Not what have you found, not what have you mapped, loosed, as though the coroner had opened a door, not filled a page. Coron logged it, and the next one came from the Tallomoth clans, the pale moth-winged traders who kept no wars and no grudges and mapped nothing and only wanted always to know which routes were safe, and the Tallomoth did not send words at all. They sent their fleet registry, the whole of it. Every hull, every route, every scheduled transit through the Aurath sphere for the coming half-year, all of it revised in the space of the hour to route around a single point in space. Around the Aurath Sanctorum. The Tallomoth had heard a song on the safe and unsafe channel, and without a word, without a war doctrine, without so much as an inquiry, they had quietly moved every ship they owned to the far side of the system from the place the song had come from. That was their answer. That was the Tallomoth telling the coroner what they had made. Coron sat with the revised registry glowing on his log and felt colder than the war tongue had made him, because the ossuary were afraid in the loud way, and fear you can bargain with, but the Tallomoth were afraid in the quiet way, the way you are afraid of weather, the way you do not argue with a thing but only get out from under it. The Vane came next, the 4-armed scholarly elite of the far sphere, the coroner's oldest clients and nearest kin in temperament, a people who valued the litany above their own histories and had built libraries to hold copies of it. The Vane did not fear easily. The Vane understood things instead. So the vain reply was long and reasoned, and it was the one that finally made Corin set down his logging stylus and put 2 hands over his frosted eyes, because the vain had done what the vain always did. They had listened to the song, and they had analyzed it, and their analysis ran to 900 lines, and its conclusion was a single line that the lattice rendered and Corin would never afterward forget. We have listened to the specimen's nervous system for 1 hour. In that hour it has not at any point considered surrender as a possible state. We have modeled the songline forward and cannot find, anywhere in its architecture, the branch where it stops. Please confirm that you have this creature restrained. Please confirm that there is only one. Please confirm that there is only one. Corin sat in the relay vault with the dead trunk lever cold beside him and thought about a debris field at the 9th marker, and a single-hull survey craft, catastrophic decompression, 1 occupant living. 1 occupant living, where the recovery cast had expected, on such a wreck, to find only the dead. He thought about how the log had not said anything about how long the human had been in that wreck before recovery. He thought about a nervous system that did not have a branch where it stopped, sitting alone in a broken hull in the cold with its air gone, refusing, for 16 days or 60, 1 animal at a time, to die, and then being pulled out and put in a bright chamber and asked, over and over, in the only language the coroner knew how to ask, the question that his whole body was built to answer. Are you going to stop? And the answer, mapped now into the litany forever, broadcast to 40 civilizations and the old dark behind them. No. Corin logged the vain analysis. Then he did a thing that was not in his orders. He opened the recovery record, the full one, the cast's field notes, not the thin Q entry, and he read what the recovery team had actually written when they pulled Cade Ferris out of the wreck, and he found the line the Q had summarized as 1 occupant living, and the field note read, in the recovery cast's dry hand. Occupant located in the collapsed forward section, sealed manually behind an interior hatch, life support tertiary and failing. Occupant conscious. Occupant had rerouted the craft's remaining power to a single low-band emitter and was transmitting on a repeating loop, a signal the cast did not translate at recovery. Signal has been appended for the cartographer's interest. Priority, low. The signal had been appended. It had been sitting in the recovery record for 16 days, unheard, because the Q had marked it low. Corin played it. It was Cade Ferris's voice, thinner and colder, and much closer to the end than the voice that had asked his name, transmitting on a loop into the empty dark from inside a broken hull with his air running out. And the lattice, which had learned the human's language now, from a day of listening, rendered it clean. This is survey diver Cade Ferris, solo craft meridian small hour, hull breached, section sealed, air maybe another day. To anybody hearing this, I'm not asking for rescue. I don't figure there's anybody close enough. I'm just leaving a marker, so somebody knows a person was here. Name's Cade Ferris. I did my job and I didn't panic and I'm not going to. If you're out there and you find this, the coordinates are in the header. Bury the marker if you find the wreck. That's all I want. Cade Ferris, meridian small hour, still here. Still here. The same 2 words. He had been saying them into the dark before the coroner ever put a hand on him. He had been saying them, calm and level, alone in the cold with his air running out, not to be rescued but only so that the universe would have a record that a person named Cade Ferris had existed and had not, at the end, panicked. And the recovery cast had filed it low, and the coroner had strapped him to a cradle and wired his refusing body to the oldest instrument they had, and squeezed. And now the 2 words were on the spine of the galaxy, broadcast at a volume the register had no numbers for, and 40 civilizations were routing their fleets around them. Corin sat in the vault for a long time. Then he went back up to the reading chamber, and he did not have a plan, and he told his prime the truth. The clients are afraid, not the loud kind. The Talamoth have moved their whole fleet off us. The vain want to know if there is only one. And the specimen, the human, his name is Cade Ferris, and before we found him he spent 16 days sealed in a broken hull with his air dying, and he did not spend it screaming. He spent it recording his own name so that someone would know he had been there. That is the song we put on the spine. That is what the galaxy is hearing. Not a weapon. A man too stubborn to stop saying his own name. Valeth stood at the master board where the inquiry channels had grown from 9 to 31. She was very still. On the cradle, Cade slept, or seemed to, his chest rising and falling in the slow level rhythm that a whole arm of the galaxy was now, against its will, listening to. The choir convenes in a quarter bell, Valeth said finally. The first voice will ask me to characterize the threat. She turned, and in the cyan daylight Corin saw that his prime certainty had not returned, but something else had come into the space where it had been, something he had no better word for than dread, the specific dread of a mapmaker who has spent her life believing the map is the world and has just watched the world climb up out of the map and stand there, breathing. Tell me how to characterize it, Corin. You have read the recovery record. You have brought it water. You have learned its name. Tell me, so that I may tell the choir, what threat a man who records his own name in the dark presents to the coroner. Corin looked at Cade Ferris, small and dirty and asleep and unstoppable on the bright cradle, and he told her the truth again, because it was all he had left. None, he said. That is the threat. That is what has frightened the vain. He does not want anything from us. He is not coming for us. He was never coming for anyone. He only refuses to stop, and he does not need a reason, and there is nothing in the whole litany that we know how to do to a thing that simply will not stop and also does not want anything. He paused. You cannot bargain with weather prime, and you cannot map it either. You can only learn where it goes and move your ships. The far spine carried the human sleeping breath out into the dark, in and out, and 31 inquiry channels waited on the board for an answer the coroner did not have, and the choir of cartographers began, one by one across the sphere, to wake. The choir did not meet in a chamber. The choir was not a room. It was a state the coroner entered together, the whole senior cartography of the sphere joining minds across the weave into a single deliberating instrument. And Corin had felt its edges before. Every apprentice felt the choir the way a fish feels a current it is too small to swim in, but he had never been inside it. He was inside it now, because Valeth had drawn him in, one hand closed hard around his upper wrist, saying, "You brought the water and you read the record. You will stand where the first voice can question you, and you will not embellish, and you will not soften." And so a junior cartographer 3 seasons past his band stood at the trembling edge of the mind of his entire civilization, while it tried to decide what to do about a song. The first voice was old. That was the first thing Corin felt, not a body. The choir had no bodies, but an age. A mind so long and so layered that touching its edge was like putting a hand against the wall of the deep archive and feeling the cold of centuries through the stone. The first voice had been a cartographer when Valeth was an apprentice, and a prime when the founders of the Oreth Sanctorum were still painting the red band on their dials, and it had mapped, in its time, some of the worst songs the litany held, and it had never, the sphere agreed, been afraid. "We have all heard it," the first voice said, and the choir stilled. "There is no cartographer on the weave who has not heard it, so I will not ask the AURETH chamber what it sounds like. I will ask only, is it still singing?" "It is," Valeth said. Her voice inside the choir was smaller than it was in the chamber, and steadier, because inside the choir you could not hide the crack, and so there was no use bracing against it. "We severed the spine feed at the trunk. It made no difference. The song entered the weave in the first wave front, and the weave propagates it now on its own. It does not require the instrument. It does not require the specimen to be conscious. It requires only that the weave exist and that the specimen breathe. And if the specimen ceases to breathe." The choir went very quiet around the question. Corin felt 30,000 cartographer minds hold still. "We do not know," Valeth said. "The modeling is not clean. The song is writing the specimen's autonomic rhythm, its breath, its pulse, and it is plausible that if the rhythm stops, the song loses its carrier and decays from the weave over some days as the lattice settles." A pause. "It is equally plausible that a nervous system which spent 16 days refusing to stop while sealed in a dying hull will, at the moment of death, do the one thing it has spent its whole existence built to do, and refuse to stop, and that we will have taken a song that is merely loud and made it the last and loudest thing that creature ever transmits, and that the weave will carry that final refusal to every mind on it, forever, because a struck bell does not stop for the death of the hammer." She let the choir feel the whole shape of it. "We do not know which, and there is only one way to learn, and it is not a way we can take back. Kill it and hope." That was the proposal, laid bare in the choir, and Corin felt a great many old careful minds turn it over and find it reasonable, because they were map-makers, and a map-maker's whole faith is that a thing understood can be managed, and here at last was a management they understood, a lever, a cessation, an ending, and Corin felt how badly the choir wanted it to be the answer. He did not mean to speak. He was junior, the choir was not for junior voices. But the first voice's cold old edge turned toward him. Valeth had positioned him exactly so it would, and it said, "The apprentice has read the recovery record. The apprentice has touched the specimen. Speak." And Corin, at the trembling edge of the mind of his people, said the thing he had come to say. "Before we found him," Corin said, "he was already transmitting. Alone in the wreck, air dying, no rescue possible. He rerouted his last power to an emitter, and he sent his own name into the empty dark on a loop, not a distress call. He said so himself. He did not expect rescue. He sent his name so that the universe would hold a record that he had existed and had not panicked. He did that for 16 days. That is the nature of the thing we mapped. It does not transmit to be answered. It transmits because it is, and being for that creature means being witnessed to have not stopped." Corin steadied himself against the cold wall of the first voice's age. "If we kill him, we will not silence the song. We will only find out what a nervous system built entirely around not stopping does when we finally, deliberately, try to stop it. And every mind on the weave will find out with us. I have brought that creature water. I have looked at it. I would counsel the choir, do not conduct that experiment. There is no version of the map where it goes the way we hope." Silence in the choir, the long cold consideration of 30,000 minds. Then from the far edge of the weave, from a bearing that did not belong to any cartographer, something else spoke into the choir. And the choir, which had never in its history been spoken into from outside, recoiled as one. It was not a client. Corin knew every client frequency. This was none of them. It came up from the old dark, from past the last archive and the last mapped world, from the region of the spine, the litany marked only with the ancient annotation, "Here we cease to sing." And it did not use the weave's grammar, because it was older than the grammar, and it did not announce itself, because the things that live where it lived do not need names among themselves. The lattice could not render it into words. It rendered instead an impression, the way you render a shape you have felt in the dark, and the impression that came into 30,000 cartographer minds and one apprentice was this: attention, vast, slow, and turning. The attention of something that had been counted among the dead for so long that the Coromer had built their whole broadcast civilization on the assumption that no one out there was still listening. And it had been listening all along on the ancient frequencies, patient as stone, and it had heard the song, and it had, for the first time in an age beyond the litany's memory, turned its attention toward the source, toward the Orith Sanctorum, toward Cade Ferris, asleep on a bright cradle, breathing. The impression carried one further thing before it withdrew, and this the lattice did render, because the meaning of it was too large to stay shapeless. It was not a threat. It was worse than a threat, because a threat is a thing directed at you, and this was not directed at anyone. It was simply a fact, laid down into the choir the way you lay down a stone you have carried a long way. We know THAT's song. We have not heard it in a long time. We did not expect to hear it again. Tend it carefully. You do not know what you are holding. And it was gone, back down into the old dark, and the weave rang with its going, and the choir, the great deliberating instrument of the chorimer, 30,000 minds that had been, a moment before, calmly weighing whether to kill a specimen in hope, came apart into ordinary terror. Corin felt it break around him. He felt the first voice's cold, ancient composure, the composure of a mind that had never been afraid. Meet the fact that something older than it had just spoken across a boundary the chorimer had believed sealed, to say we know that song. And he felt the first voice do the thing that no one in the sphere had ever felt the first voice do. He felt it not know what to do. Tend it carefully, the old dark had said. You do not know what you are holding. The choir dissolved. Cartographers fell back into their own separate minds across the sphere, and Corin came back into his body in the bright reading chamber with Valeth's hand still hard around his wrist and both of them breathing fast and shallow in the cyan light. And on the cradle Cade, Ferris opened his eyes. You've all gone quiet, Cade said. His voice was rough with sleep. He looked from Valeth to Corin and back, reading their faces with the plain attention of a man who has spent his life reading gauges and weather and the small tells of people who are trying not to show him something. That specific kind of quiet. I know that quiet. That's the quiet on a rig when somebody topside just heard something on the line that they're not telling the divers. He let his head settle back. So, something out there answered. Something you didn't want to answer, a beat. It scared you worse than I do. Neither cartographer spoke. Figures, Cade said almost gently to the bright ceiling. There's always something bigger down there. That's the first thing the deep teaches you. You go down thinking you're the scariest thing in the water, and the water's real polite about it, lets you keep thinking that for a while. And then one day the light hits something at the edge of the beam that's just old. Old and slow, and it was there before you and it'll be there after, and it looks at you. And you understand real fast that the only reason you're still breathing is it hasn't decided you're worth the trouble. He closed his eyes. You just met yours. Whatever it was, congratulations. Now you know how the rest of us feel every time we look up at your ceiling lights and can't figure out how to ask for water. Valeth Dross let go of Corin's wrist. She crossed to the cradle, slowly, all four arms loose at her sides, none of them near a manifold or a key, and she stood over the human she had ordered squeezed, and she looked at him for a long moment in the light her founders had called holy. What are you? She said. It was not the Prime's flat instrument, it was barely a whisper. In 9,000 species I have never mapped a mind that did not somewhere want to be safe. Every song in the litany bends at the end toward safety, toward the den, the hive, the deep water, the held breath. It is the one note they all share. It is the note I have built my life on finding. She leaned closer. Yours does not have it. I have looked. There is no den in your song. Where the safety note should be there is only the next breath, and the next, without end. What kind of world makes a mind with no den in it? What kind of world teaches a thing that there is no safe place and to keep breathing anyway? Cade Ferris opened his eyes and looked up at the prime cartographer of the Aureath Sanctorum, and for the first time since the recovery cast had pulled him out of the dark, something crossed his tired face that was almost kindness. The regular kind, he said. We just call it home. The reactions came in faster after the choir broke, because the choir breaking was itself a thing the sphere could feel. 30,000 cartographers coming apart into ordinary terror sent its own wave down the weave, and the clients had their receivers on the weave's edges the way the clients always did. And they knew, now, that whatever the chorimer had loosed had frightened even the mind that mapped the death song of the undersung and had never been afraid. Corin logged them from the relay vault, because Valeth had sent him back down to log while she stayed at the cradle, and the logging was the only thing keeping the floor of his mind from tilting, so he logged. The sepulchral houses of the far sphere sent their whole priesthood into silence and would not answer a hail for a day, and when they answered at last it was to ask the coroner, in the grave, slow grammar of a people who tended the dead of 9 species, one question: is the singer a living thing, or is it a thing that has already died and does not know to lie down? The lattice rendered it, and Coron had no answer to send, because he had stood over Cade Ferris and asked himself the same thing and come away not certain. The Kelith drift clans, who mapped nothing and traded nothing, and only rode the long cold currents between the stars in their bladed sail hulls, did a thing the near sphere had never known them to do. They furled their sails. The whole drift, every hull all at once, folding their great blades in against their hulls the way a thing folds itself small in the presence of a predator, and holding there, running dark and silent, waiting to see which way the new terror moved before they dared open a sail again. The Kelith did not fear war fleets. They outran war fleets. They had outrun the ossuary for 1,000 years. They furled their sails for a song. And the vane sent a second transmission, because the vane could not stop analyzing even when the analyzing frightened them, and this one was shorter than the first and worse. We have modeled the specimen's world from the specimen's song. We did not intend to. The song contains it. A nervous system carries the shape of the pressure that made it, and we are readers of shape. We must report what we found, because to hold it back would be a greater danger than to send it. The specimen is not exceptional among its kind. We have looked for the markers of an outlier, an unusual mind, a singular will, the one in a billion that every species produces and mistakes for the species. They are not present. The song's architecture is common. It is infrastructure. It is what its world builds as a baseline, the way our world builds a spine. The coroner have not mapped a hero. They have mapped a floor. Please understand what we are telling you. That was the floor. Coron read that was the floor 3 times in the cold vault, and then he set his stylus down and put 2 hands over his frosted eyes, because the vane were never wrong about shape. And he had already known it. Cade had already told him. There's no disaster. It's 10,000 small things. Everything from home that's still alive is the child of things that didn't stop. But there was a difference between a dying man saying it soft on a cradle and the finest analysts in the far sphere saying it cold on the open band to 40 listening civilizations. That was the floor, not the ceiling, not the champion, the floor, the baseline, the heater repairman. And every receiver in the Orath sphere had heard the vane say it, and every one of them was doing, in its own grammar, the same arithmetic Coron was doing, which was, if that is the floor, what is the rest of the building? Only one voice in the whole sphere refused the fear, and it was the one Coron trusted least. The Hallowmind Assembly were the sphere's talkers, the sleek gray-mottled cephalopod broadcasters who ran the open bands and shaped what the clients believed about one another, and the Hallowmind could not afford a fear they had not been the first to name, so they named the opposite. They flooded the open band with calm. It is a hoax, the Hallowmind said, or an error, or a coroner induction fault mistaken for a signal. There is no world that grows minds without a stopping branch. The notion offends reason. The near sphere is frightening itself over a mismapped animal, and the responsible course is composure. They ran it on every band, sleek and certain, over the Kelith's furled sails and the sepulchral silence and the veins that was the floor. And Coron listened to the Hallowmind explain that the thing 4,000 cartographers had felt in their own minds was not real, and understood that the talkers were not lying to the sphere so much as lying to themselves, out loud, at volume, because the alternative was to feel the thing the Kelith felt. And the Hallowmind had built their whole civilization on never having to feel it. It held for 6 hours. Then the Hallowmind's own array crews, who had heard the raw song, and not just the Assembly's calm about it, began quietly to file transfer requests off the inner stations, and the Assembly's composure got a hairline crack in it. And by the time the ossuary announced their triad, the Hallowmind had gone silent on the subject altogether, which was, from the talkers, the loudest thing they could have said. Coran logged it all. He logged the sepulchral question and the Kelith sails and the veins floor and the halomine's failed calm, and he carried the whole record back up to the bright chamber and laid it before his prime, and Valeth read it standing over the cradle where Cade slept his costly sleep, and when she had read it she was quiet for a while. "The talkers are the tell," she said at last, "not the ossuary. The ossuary are afraid honestly, and I can respect an honest fear. It is the halomind I will remember, that the sphere's great instrument of composure heard this and could not hold its composure, and had to shout that there was nothing to hear, and could not even hold the shout." She set the record down. "There is a thing that happens to a civilization when it meets a fact too large for its shelves, Coran. The honest ones fold their sails. The grave ones go silent and tend their dead. The clever ones analyze until the analysis frightens them worse than the fact. And the vain ones stand in the middle of the road and explain at the top of their voice that the thing bearing down on them is not real, right up until it is close enough to feel." She looked at the sleeping human. "We are the vain ones, or we were. We built the widest voice in the arm of the galaxy, and we were so proud of it that we forgot to check whether the door to our own instrument was sealed, and a thing we filed as low priority walked out of it and remade every shelf we own. The only reason we are not the halomind, standing in the road explaining that he is not real, is that he is on our cradle, and we cannot look away from him, and so we do not get to pretend." Her throat membrane drew tight. "Log the last of it and seal the record. When the histories are written, I want it plain that the Orath Sanctorum did not, in the end, stand in the road and shout. Whatever else we did wrong, and it is a long list, and it is under my name, I want it written that we looked at the thing, and did not pretend it was not real and tended it. That will have to be enough. It is more than the talkers managed." Coran sealed the record. Out along the weave the sphere went on reacting in its four ways: the folded and the silent and the frightened clever and the shrilly certain. And under all of it, steady and level and entirely unbothered, a working man's borrowed breath went on carrying to 40 civilizations the one fact none of their four ways could shelve: that he was the floor, and the floor was still here, and the rest of the building was coming. The ossuary conquered, decided to burn them at the fourth bell. Coran learned it the way he learned everything now, from the board, which had stopped counting inquiry channels and started counting fleets. The ossuary were a warcast people, and their answer to a thing they could not map and could not bargain with was the oldest answer their breed had: remove the ground it stood on. If the Coramer could not silence the song, the ossuary would silence the singer. And if silencing the singer meant reducing the Orath Sanctorum and its 900 years of archives and its 4,000 living Coramer to a slick of cooling slag at the 9th marker, then the ossuary conquered judged that a price the near sphere could afford. Because a mapped apex song was a horror you could root around, and an unmapped one broadcasting live from a station full of the galaxy's finest mind mappers was a horror that might, if left to sing, teach the whole litany a new note. The war-tongue transmission was not sent to the Coramer. It was sent past them, to the Talomoth and the Vane and the near clients, and the lattice caught it on the open band, and it was courteous in the way of people who have already decided to kill you and want the neighbors to understand why. To the NEAR sphere, the AURETHSANCTURUM has loosed a song that does not stop. We have modeled it as the CORYMAR have modeled it, and we concur. It will not decay while the singer lives. The CORYMAR will not end the singer, because the CORYMAR map and do not kill. We are not so encumbered. A cleansing triad DEPARTS the ossuary muster at this bell. It will arrive at the 9th marker in 11 HOURS. The CORYMAR may evacuate their archives. They may not evacuate the singer. Any hull leaving AURETH that will not answer for its cargo will burn with the station. The song ends at the 9th marker. This is mercy. We do it before the far sphere must. 11 hours. They'll do it, Coran said. He had never seen a cleansing triad, no one at Orith had. The ossuary reserved them for the worst entries in their own private catalogue, the songs so bad they built ships specifically to erase the places those songs came from. Prime, they will actually do it. 4,000 of us, the whole archive, to silence one. I know what they will do. Valeth had not moved from the cradle. She had been at the cradle for a bell now, not mapping. She had not touched a key since the choir broke, but standing over Cade Ferris the way Coron had seen her stand over nothing else in 6 years, watching him breathe as though the breathing were itself the thing she was finally, belatedly, trying to understand. The ossuary are consistent. It is their single virtue. When they cannot cage a thing, they burn the room it is in, and they have never once regretted it because a burned room files cleanly and a caged horror files never. She turned. Coron, the specimen's condition. You have the physiological board. Tell me plainly. Coron told her plainly. He had been watching that board too, in the spaces between the fleet count, and what it showed him was the one thing in the whole widening catastrophe that he could not root around or bargain with or hand up to the choir. He is failing, he said. The forced map, the collapsed gate, the 4th tier, the 16 days before that with no proper intake it has cost him. His pulse is climbing and thinning. His body is spending itself to keep the rhythm level, and the rhythm is what carries the song. So the harder the galaxy leans on the song, the harder his body works to hold the breath steady, and it cannot do that forever. He is a nervous system with no den in it, prime, running an instrument sized for a civilization, on a body that weighs less than one of your archive doors. Coron made himself say the rest. He is dying, not fast, but the song is killing the singer to keep singing, and there is no branch in the map where that reverses on its own. The ossuary modeled it right. It will not decay while he lives. It will decay when he dies, and he is going to die whether the triad arrives or not. The triad only makes it 11 hours instead of a few days. Valeth was quiet. Then the ossuary and the far sphere and the old dark are all wrong about the same thing, she said slowly, in the same direction, and I have been wrong with them, and I have been wrong for a bell now while I stood here and watched him breathe and could not think why the wrongness would not leave me. She looked at Coron with her frosted eyes. We have all been treating the song as the thing. The song is not the thing. The song is what a body does when you force it to sing and will not let it stop. We built our whole science on the belief that a mind wants at the end to be safe, and his does not, and I have called that the horror of him. But I was reading it as an absence. It is not an absence. She turned back to the cradle. It is a substitution. Where every other song bends toward the den, his bends toward being witnessed to have endured. That is his safety note. That is his den, not a place, a record, so somebody knows a person was here. She said the last in the human's own words. The words from the recording Coron had played her, and Coron felt something move under his sternum that he did not have a catalogue entry for either. He does not want to be safe, Valeth said. He wants to have not stopped and to be known to have not stopped. That is the whole of the song. And we have given him the largest witness in the history of the galaxy, 40 civilizations and a power older than the litany. And then we have kept forcing the song, kept squeezing, so that the very thing his body most wants, the witness, the record, is bound to the very thing that is killing him, the forcing. We have made his den and his death the same act. Her throat membrane drew tight. Coron. What happens to a song that no one is forcing anymore, if the singer is finally allowed to finish it himself? Coron did not know. It had never been done. No cartographer had ever asked a songline what it wanted. You took the song, you filed it, you moved to the next cradle. The map does not go there, he said. We have never released a live map to resolve on its own. We collapse the gate and file the reading. We have no protocol for, he stopped. You want to uncollapse the gate. You want to stop forcing it and let him finish it. I want to stop doing the one thing that a power older than my whole civilization told me not to do, Valeth said. It said tend it carefully. It did not say silence it. It did not say file it. It said tend. We do not have a word for that in cartography. We map or we do not map. We have never in 9,000 species tended one. She looked at the human, small and graying on the bright cradle. I am going to learn the word from him if he will teach me. If there is time before the triad. On the cradle, Cade Ferris said, without opening his eyes, in a voice gone thin as the emitter recording from the wreck. There's a fleet coming to blow up the station, isn't there? That's the new quiet. That's the topside. Just heard something quiet with a clock on it now. He drew a breath, and Corin watched the board show him how much the breath cost. How long? 11 hours, Corin said. He had decided, somewhere in the last bell, to stop deciding which truths a specimen was owed. An ossuary cleansing triad. They mean to burn Orith to end the song. They think it is the only way to silence you. They're not wrong that it'd work. Cade's mouth moved in something that was trying to be a smile. Burn the rig, kill the diver, no more signal. Simple. I'd probably order it too if I was topside and something was coming up the line that I couldn't shut off and couldn't understand. He got his eyes open, found Corin, then Valeth. Here's the thing though, I don't want your station burned. 4,000 of you. Whatever I am to your galaxy, I'm not the guy who wanted a station full of people cooked to shut me up. That's not a record I want left. You understand? I've spent this whole thing, the wreck, the 16 days, all of it, trying to make sure the record of me is a person who did his job and didn't panic. Not a person who got 4,000 strangers killed because he couldn't stop a machine you plugged him into. He let his head fall back. So if there's a way to end the song that doesn't end your station, I'm for it. Even if it ends me, especially if it ends me, that's the job. You go down so the rig comes up. There may be a way, Valeth said. It is not a way I understand yet. It requires that we stop forcing the song and let you finish it yourself. Resolve it, the way a held note resolves when the hand comes off the instrument. I do not know if the weave will let a song resolve that it has been carrying this hard. I do not know if it will decay or ring forever. And I will not pretend to you, Cade Ferris, that finishing the song and finishing you are separate acts. They may be the same act. Almost certainly they are the same act. Yeah, Cade said, I got that. You are the only mind I have ever mapped that I have asked before acting, Valeth said. Her voice was very quiet. I do not have a protocol for asking, so I will simply ask. Will you let me stop forcing your song and finish it, knowing what it costs? Cade Ferris looked up at the ceiling of the bright chamber for a while. Corin watched him do the thing that the whole galaxy had been listening to for a day, the slow level breathing in and out, and understood now that it was not defiance and had never been defiance. It was a man keeping a promise to himself in the only language his body had. Ask me something else first, Cade said. The thing about resolving it myself. If I do it, if it works, does the song still go out? Does the record still stand? That I was here, that I didn't stop till I chose to. It will stand in the litany forever, Valeth said. That is the one thing I can promise you. A resolved song is filed as a master. It cannot be unfiled. 40 civilizations have heard it, and a power older than my people has named it. Whatever else happens at the 9th marker, Cade Ferris, the galaxy will not forget that you were here. You have already made certain of that. You did it in the wreck before we ever touched you. We only made it loud. Okay, Cade said. Okay. And he closed his eyes and the breath went level, and the board showed Corin the cost of the level, and the fleet count on the master board said 11 hours and had begun, quietly to fall. The station tried to give him to the ossuary at the 2nd hour. It was not the choir and it was not Valeth. It was the warden caste, the thick gray isolate minds who kept the Orith Sanctorum's hulls and locks, and never joined the weave because a warden who could be read could be turned. And their master was a broad slate-scaled old officer named Sethurin Molt, who had spent 40 years keeping 4,000 cartographers alive, and did not intend to stop over one biped. Sethurin came to the reading chamber with 6 wardens and a hull sled, and the flat certainty of a man who has done the arithmetic and does not care whether you like the answer. Prime cartographer. Sethuran's voice was the ground-down bass of a caste that spoke rarely and never asked twice. "The ossuary triad will kill this station in 9 hours. It will not kill this station if the singer is not on it. I am going to put the singer on the sled, and I am going to launch him toward the 9th marker in a beacon hull that answers for its cargo, and the ossuary will burn him alone in open space en route home, and 4,000 of us and 900 years of the litany will still be here at the 10th bell. I did not come to debate this. I came to be quick about it so it hurts fewer people. Stand away from the cradle." Corin stepped in front of the cradle before he had decided to. He was junior. He was unarmed. He was a third the mass of any warden in the doorway, and he put himself between Cade Ferris and 6 wardens with all 4 of his hands open at his sides, because his body had decided the thing his mind was still catching up to. "Warden Master," Corin said, "listen to me. It will not work. The song is in the weave. It does not need the singer's location. You can launch him to the 9th marker and the ossuary can burn him there, and the song will still be riding every Coromer mind on the lattice. And now it will be a song of a man your station handed over to be burned alone, and the old dark that named it and told us to tend it will have heard us do exactly the opposite. You will not save the station. You will only change what the record says the station is, and there is a thing in the deep past listening to that record right now." "I do not join the weave, apprentice," Sethuran said. "I do not hear your old dark. I hear an ossuary muster order and a 9-hour clock, and those I understand." He lifted one broad gray hand, and the wardens came forward. Sethuran. Valeth had not moved fast. She never moved fast, but she was between the wardens and Corin now, all 4 arms loose, her frosted eyes level on the warden master she had worked beside for 2 decades. "You have kept us alive 40 years, and I have never once countermanded you, because you were always right, because the threats were always things a hull could answer. This is not a thing a hull can answer. I need you to trust for the first time that there is a threat in my science that is realer than the one on your board." Her voice dropped. The old dark spoke into the choir. "I have never felt the first voice afraid. I felt it afraid." Something that predates the litany turned its attention toward this station and told us to tend the singer carefully. If you launch him, we do not learn what happens when that thing arrives to find we did not. I would rather face the ossuary triad than teach the old dark that the Coromer cannot be trusted with a song it cared about. 9 hours of ossuary I might survive. The other thing I do not think any of us survive, and I do not think it is a burning. I think it is a forgetting. I think it unsings us from the litany, and a people who are unsung were never here at all." The warden stopped. Sethuran Molt looked at the prime cartographer for a long, grinding moment. Then he looked past both of them, at the small gray creature on the cradle who had lifted his head to watch 6 armored wardens decide whether to launch him into open space to be burned alone, and who was watching it the way a man watches whether he has already made his peace with. "Speak, singer," Sethuran said. "You have heard your options. The prime would keep you here to finish some song I cannot hear, and the arithmetic says it kills my station. I would launch you to die alone and clean and save 4,000. You are the cargo. Cargo does not usually get a voice. Give me a reason to spend my caste's lives on the prime's science instead of the ossuary's certainty." Cade Ferris was quiet a moment. Then, in the thin, worn voice, "You're the guy who keeps everybody breathing." "I respect that. I was that guy on my rig, junior version, but same job. Somebody's got to do the cold math or everybody dies romantic and stupid." He drew a careful breath. "So I'll give you cold math back. You launch me, you buy 9 hours and a story about a station that handed a man over to be burned. She keeps me. You spend 9 hours and maybe you all die, but the story is different. And you heard her, there's something out there that keeps the story, something old. In my experience, the old things don't care how the fight came out. They care what you did when it was hard." He met the warden's eyes. "I've been the cargo my whole life, warden master. Cargo the deep tried to crush, cargo the vacuum tried to boil, cargo a station pulled out of a wreck and wired to a machine. I know exactly what cargo's worth. And I'm telling you, the only thing cargo ever gets to decide is what it's a record of. Don't make your station a record of the day it launched a man to be burned to save 9 hours. You'll be alive and you'll wish you weren't. I've seen that in men's faces 40 clicks down, being the one who lived because you launched somebody. It doesn't leave. Sethurin Molt stood in the cyan daylight, 40 years of arithmetic behind his gray slate eyes, and Corin watched the warden master do the hardest thing a warden can do, which is set the arithmetic down. 9 hours prime, Sethurin said at last. You have until the triad is in range. I will hold the hull and I will not launch him. But when the triad crosses the 9th marker and your science has not silenced this, I will do my cast's duty and I will not ask your leave, and the record can say what it likes about me. Finish your song. He turned his bulk toward the door and paused and looked back at Cade one last time and said the thing that Corin understood later had been the first crack the human made in the oldest and hardest cast on the station. I have launched cargo before, Singer. You are right. It does not leave. And he was gone and his 6 wardens with him, and the clock read 9 hours. They began at the 3rd. It took an hour because there was no protocol and Valeth had to build one from nothing, in the open, with Corin at the console and Cade fading on the cradle, and every step of it was a step no cartographer had taken. To stop forcing a song, you did not simply release it. The induction rig had the song under tension, the way a winch has a load under tension, and you could no more let go all at once than a winch hand can drop a load and expect it to settle gently. It had to come off in stages. And every stage that came off the rig went onto the singer, because the rig had been carrying part of the killing weight, and now the singer carried all of it, and the physiological board told Corin exactly what that cost in the only honest language it had, which was numbers that fell. His pulse is thinning as the tension comes off the rig, Corin said. We are trading the machine's grip for his. Each stage we release, he holds more of it himself, and he has less to hold it with. He looked up. Prime. He cannot hold the whole song. When the last stage comes off the rig, he will be carrying a civilization-sized induction on a nervous system that is already spending its last reserves to keep one breath level. The map does not. There is no branch where the body survives holding the whole song alone. I know, Valeth said. That is why he does not have to hold it. He has to finish it. She had her long hands spread over the induction manifold, not gripping now but resting, the way Corin had never seen her rest them, the way you rest a hand on something living. A held note kills the holder. A resolved note does not because it ends. We are not asking him to carry the whole song, Corin. We are asking him to end it on purpose, to choose the last breath instead of being forced past it. That is the only way it comes off the weave clean. If the singer resolves it himself, the lattice reads it as a completed master and files it and settles and the ringing stops. But he has to choose the ending. We cannot choose it for him and neither can the rig. That is why no song has ever resolved this way. Because we have never once in 9,000 species let the singer choose. She looked at Cade. That is what tend meant, she said softly, more to herself than to anyone. The old dark did not tell us to silence it or file it. It told us to tend it. It knew. It has held one of these before, a song with no den in it, and it knew that the only way such a song ends without ringing forever is if the thing singing it is allowed at the last to decide the last note itself, to finish, instead of being finished. Her throat membrane was tight. We have spent a day and a civilization's worth of terror to arrive at a thing so simple I am ashamed of my whole science. You cannot take a human's ending from him. You can only stand near it and witness it and let it be his. Cade Ferris had been listening. He always listened. It was, Corin had come to understand, the deepest thing in him after the not stopping he watched, and he listened and he read the room, the way a man reads 40 kilometers of black water for the one current that will kill him. And now he lay on the bright cradle with the rig coming off him stage by stage and the weight of the whole song settling onto the small, worn engine of his own body. And he did the thing that no specimen in the history of the Aura Sanctorum had ever done, which was smile at the two people who had been sent to map him to death. "So it comes down to me choosing when to stop," Cade said. "After all this. 40 civilizations, a fleet coming to burn you, something older than God out in the dark, and the whole thing hinges on a diver deciding when to take his last breath." The smile held. "You know that's funny, right? That's actually funny. My whole life everybody topside made the calls and the divers just held on. And the one time it matters to the whole galaxy, turns out the only one who gets to make the call is the guy holding on." He breathed level in and out along the weave. A civilization felt it and did not yet know it was the beginning of the end. "All right, Prime, take your machine off me. Slow. Let me feel where the weight sits. When it's all mine, I'll know. A man knows the water when it's finally all his." And Valeth Dross, finest mapper of minds the Aura Sanctorum had produced in a century, bowed her narrow head over the manifold, and began, for the first time in her life, to let a song go. The first stage came off the rig, and the weave fought her. Corin felt it through the console, and through his own lashed-in mind at once. The lattice did not want to give the song back to the singer. It had carried the note so long and so hard that it had begun, in its blind carrying way, to treat the note as its own. The song had grooved a channel through the whole Corimer mind the way a river grooves stone, and when Valeth eased the rig's grip and tried to hand the tension back to Cade, the weave clenched to keep it. The needle jumped. The low sound came up out of the rig again, and on the cradle Cade's back arched off the cowl, and the physiological board threw every warning it had. "It won't let go," Corin said. "The weave won't. It's holding the song against him. It doesn't want to hand it back. Prime, if we force the release the way we force the map, we've learned nothing." "Then we do not force it." Valeth's hands were spread and still over the manifold. "We ask." The weave clenches because it is afraid. It has never carried a song it could not file, and an unfiled song is an open wound in a lattice built on completion. It will not release the note until it believes the note will resolve, so we must show it. Corin, open your mind to the lattice, all the way, not the working channel. You. Corin had never opened all the way. No apprentice did. You kept a wall always between your working self and the great shared dark of the weave, because the weave was vast and you were small, and a mind that opened all the way could be swept off its own foundations and never find the way back. His training screamed against it. He opened all the way. The weave came into him like the sea into a breached hull, and for a moment Corin Orith was not one cartographer but a node in something 900 years wide and 30,000 minds deep. And he felt all of it, all at once, the terror running the length of the lattice. Every Corimer from Belloc to the deep archive feeling the unresolved song grind in the channel it had cut, feeling the wound of it, feeling the weave clench and not know how to stop. And under the terror, threaded through it, the song itself. Cade Ferris's level breath, going out along the whole lattice, in and out, patient, unstopping. A small stubborn rhythm holding a civilization's mind hostage not by force but simply by refusing, the way it had always refused, to end before it chose to. And Corin, opened all the way, did the only thing he had left. He gave the weave the record. He gave it the recovery recording, Cade's voice from the wreck, thin and calm. "I did my job and I didn't panic and I'm not going to." He gave it the field note, occupant located, sealed manually behind an interior hatch. He gave it the water and the asking of the name, and Cade telling Sethuran, "Don't make your station a record of the day it launched a man to be burned." He gave the weave everything he had learned about the thing it was carrying, and he felt the whole lattice receive it, 30,000 minds meeting, for the first time, not the song but the singer, not the note but the man, and he felt the terror change. It did not stop being terror, but it stopped being only terror. Under it, spreading the length of the weave, came a thing the Corimer had no cartographer's word for. A thing that is what terror becomes when the thing you fear turns out to also be the bravest thing you have ever witnessed. and Corin would spend the rest of his life calling it, for lack of the true word, awe. The weave's grip eased. "It's letting go," Corin said, his own voice far away, half of him still out in the lattice. It understands now. It knows what it's carrying. It will hand the song back to him if he'll finish it. It wants to file it. It wants the wound closed. It just needs him to choose the last note. "Not yet," Cade said. Both cartographers looked at him. The rig had eased. The song sat lighter on him now, held ready, waiting, and Cade Ferris lay on the bright cradle with his eyes open and a strange far look in them. And Corin realized that opening the weave all the way had done a thing to the human too, that the flood had run both directions, that the lattice full of 30,000 minds now touched Cade the way it touched Corin, and that Cade was remembering. "Not yet," Cade said again, softer. "Something's happening. Your machine or your weave or whatever, it's pulling stuff up. I can feel it going out, not just the breathing now. It's pulling up where the breathing comes from." His far eyes moved. "It's pulling up home." "Then let it," Valeth said quietly. She had gone very still. "The song wants to resolve, Cade Ferris, and a song resolves by returning to where it began. If your ending needs your beginning, then give the weave your beginning. Let the galaxy hear where the breath was taught. It is listening. Everything is listening. Tell it where you learned not to stop." And Cade Ferris, dying on a bright cradle at the 9th marker with a fleet 9 hours out and a power older than the litany drawing near, told the galaxy about home, and the galaxy, 40 civilizations, 30,000 cartographers, the old dark on its ancient frequencies, went quiet to hear it. "It's a heavy world," Cade said. "That's the first thing you'd have to understand. Everything on it weighs more than it should. You spend your whole life being pulled down and you don't even feel it because you never felt anything else. Your heart's a fist that spends 70, 80 years pushing your own blood up against the pull, every second never resting, not once, and you never thank it and you never notice, because that's just Tuesday. That's just being from there." His far eyes moved across the bright ceiling like it was another sky. "And it's mostly water, my world, deep, dark, cold water, more of it than land. And the water's got a floor so far down the pull turns it to a thing that crush any of your ships like a shell. And that's where I worked, down there. In the crush and the cold and the dark in a suit, 40 kilometers down, fixing the machines that pull the heat up out of the deep, so the cities can breathe." Corin watched the physiological board and watched the song go out and understood slowly that he was hearing the death world the litany had no name for, described from the inside by a creature who had thought it ordinary. "You want to know what makes a nervous system with no den in it," Cade said to Valeth, though his eyes stayed far. "It's not one big thing. That's what your prime got wrong and the vein and all of them. They're looking for the disaster that made me. There's no disaster. It's 10,000 small things every day from before you're born. It's a world where the water will boil the air out of you at the surface and crush you flat at the floor and freeze you between. And none of it hates you. That's the part your people can't seem to hold. None of it hates you. It's just how the water is. And you learn before you can talk that the world isn't cruel. It just doesn't stop. So you don't stop either, because stopping is the only mistake the water actually punishes." He breathed. "Everything on my world that's still alive is the child of 400,000 years of things that didn't stop. We're not brave. Bravery's for people who have a choice. We just never had the branch you keep looking for. The one where you stop. It got bred out of us so long ago there's no fossil of it. There's no den in the song because there was never a den on the world, just the next breath. And the next, same as the fish. Same as everything down there that's still down there." Out along the weave, 30,000 cartographers wept without knowing they were doing it, because the Coromer did not have weeping, and had just been given by a dying biped, the thing that would teach it to them. "My mother worked the deep before me," Cade said. "Hers before her. We've got a saying, divers do, you go down so the rig comes up, means the job's bigger than you. Means you spend yourself so the thing you're keeping alive keeps living. My whole line's been going down so the rig comes up for 200 years. That's the song, Prime. That's the whole song your machine's been screaming across your galaxy. It's not a war cry. It's a work song. It's 400,000 years of small, tired people going down into the crush one more time so somebody topside gets to breathe. His far eyes came back slowly and found Corin, and the ghost of the smile came with them. And the funny thing, the actually funny thing, is you built a machine to map the scariest nervous systems in the galaxy, and you plugged it into a maintenance diver. Not a soldier, not a hunter, a guy who fixes heaters at the bottom of the sea. And I'm the thing that made your whole galaxy route its fleets, not our warriors. Our warriors terrify you, sure, but you didn't get a warrior. You got a working man on a bad shift. The smile held. Wait till you meet the rest of us. The clock read 8 hours. On the master board, the ossuary cleansing triad crossed from the far muster into the near sphere, and Corin saw it happen, logged it, could not at first believe it. The triad's advance slowed. Not stopped, slowed. 3 warcast hulls built for one purpose, hearing on their receivers a song that had changed under them. That was no longer only the impossible unstopping climb, but now, threaded through it, a heavy world and a cold sea and a work song 200 years long. And the ossuary, who were warriors and understood a war cry, did not know what to do with a work song, and their certainty, the one virtue of their breed, for the first time in the memory of the near sphere, wavered. The old dark arrived at the 7th hour, and it did not come the way a fleet comes. Corin felt it before the board saw it, because half of him was still out in the opened weave, and the weave felt it first, a pressure at the far edge of the lattice, the way a held room feels a great door open somewhere far off in the building, a change in how the air sat. The board caught up a moment later, a single contact, resolving out of the region the litany marked "Here we cease to sing," on a bearing that had held nothing but silence for longer than the Coromer had been a spacefaring people. One contact, it did not broadcast, it did not hail. It simply came, unhurried, enormous in a way the board could not fix a scale to. The ranging pulses went out and did not come cleanly back, as though the thing they struck did not have edges so much as depths. And it came toward the 9th marker, toward the Orath Sanctorum, toward the song. Prime, Corin said. His voice had gone very quiet. It's here, the old dark, it's coming in. One contact, no hail. It'll reach the marker before the ossuary. Valeth did not look up from the manifold. Her hands were still spread, still easing the song stage by stage back toward the singer, and her frosted eyes were closed. Then we do what it told us. We tend. We do not fear it, and we do not fight it, and we do not launch the singer to be clean of it. We finish the song, and we let it witness the finishing, because I begin to think that is the whole of why it has come. Her voice was steady now, steadier than it had been since the map first climbed off the register, with the particular steadiness of a mind that has stopped trying to manage a thing and started instead to meet it. It said it knew the song. It said it had not heard it in a long time. Corin, a thing does not cross a silence that old to destroy a note it recognizes. You do not travel to a funeral to kill the dead. It has come to hear the ending. It has come because somewhere in its own long memory it held a song like this one, and it wants to know how ours ends. On the cradle, Cade was fading, and would not lie to himself about it. The physiological board had stopped throwing warnings, which was worse than warnings. It had settled into the flat, quiet reporting of a body running out its last reserves, spending them at a steady rate on the one thing it had always spent them on, the level breath. His skin had grayed further. His far eyes had trouble holding a point now. But he was awake, and he was Cade Ferris, and when the pressure of the old dark's arrival rolled through the opened weave and into him, he felt it, and he almost laughed. There it is, he said, the thing at the edge of the beam, the old slow thing that was here before you and'll be here after. His voice was a thread. It came to look at me. It came to witness the ending of your song, Valeth said. It held one like it once, long ago. Before my people sang it all. Yeah, Cade's gray mouth moved. Then it knows the deep. You don't get old and slow and still down there unless you learn the one thing. Same thing I learned. Same thing my mother learned. His thread of a voice went on, out along the weave, to 30,000 cartographers and 40 civilizations and the enormous patient thing sliding in toward the marker. You don't beat the deep. Nobody beats the deep. The deep's bigger than you and colder than you, and it was here first, and it doesn't hate you and it doesn't stop. You don't beat it, he breathed. You just don't stop first. That's the whole secret. That's the only secret. Whoever stops first, the deep keeps. So you don't stop first, even when you're the smallest thing in the water. Especially then. His far eyes found the ceiling, the bright holy sky the founders had built. That old thing out there, it's still here because it never stopped first, just like me, just like everything from home. We're the same kind of thing, it and me. We just come from different water. And out of the old dark, across the ancient frequencies, into the opened weave where Coron could feel it and Valeth could feel it and, faintly dying, Cade could feel it too, the enormous patient thing answered. And this time the lattice rendered it, because the thing wanted, for once, to be understood. Yes. That was all. One word laid down into the mind of a civilization like a stone carried a very long way. Yes, agreement, recognition. The old dark, the thing older than the litany, the power the Coromer had built their whole broadcast faith on the absence of, had listened to a dying maintenance diver explain the deep, and had answered yes, because it was true, because it had learned the same thing in its own black water an age ago, because there is only ever the one secret, and every creature that has ever come up out of a world that tried to kill it knows the same secret, and knows its own kind when it hears the secret spoken aloud. And then the old dark did the thing that broke the ossuary. It turned its attention outward. Coron felt it happen through the weave, the vast slow regard that had been fixed on the 9th marker, on the song on Cade, swung deliberately toward the near sphere, toward 3 warcast hulls that had slowed but not stopped, that were still coming. Still 11 hours became 7 became 5 from reducing the Orath Sanctorum to slag to silence, a song the old dark had crossed a geological silence to hear finished. The old dark looked at the ossuary. It did not threaten them. It did not hail them. It simply, for the first time in an age, let them feel it looking, turned the full weight of its attention onto 3 ships whose whole doctrine was built on being the most dangerous thing in any water they entered, and let them understand, in the wordless way that old things make small things understand, that they were about to burn a place that this had chosen to witness. The ossuary cleansing triad came about. Coron logged it because logging was still what he had. 3 hulls built for one purpose, that had never in the history of the conquered aborted a cleansing, that had reduced whole worlds to files, put their prows over and burned hard for the muster, and did not send a word of explanation to the near sphere, because there was no word in the war tongue, for we felt something look at us, and we remembered we could die. The Tallomoth, watching, revised their registry a second time, routing now not away from the Orath Sanctorum, but away from the whole region the old dark had come out of, a wider circle, a deeper caution. The vein sent one final transmission, and it was not an analysis, because the vein had run out of analysis. It was 3 words, and they were the truest thing the scholarly elite had ever put on the open band. We were wrong. The triads turned, Coron said. He could hardly believe the board. Prime, it's turned. The old dark, it looked at them and they turned. The station's safe. 4,000 of us. We're going to live. We were always going to live or not live by whether we tended it, Valeth said. The triad was never the real test. Sethuran's arithmetic was correct, and it was also beside the point. The real question was only ever what we would choose to be while the singer finished. Her hands moved on the manifold, easing off another stage, and the last of the rig's grip came away, and the whole weight of the song settled, finally, onto the small failing body of Cade Ferris. And now there is only the song left, and the singer, and the 2 witnesses he asked for and the one he did not, and the ending. Coron. The rig is off him. It is all his now. The weave will let it resolve. It needs only the last note. She looked at the human. And I have to tell you a thing I have been afraid to tell you, Cade Ferris, and I am done being afraid of things in front of you because you have not once been afraid of anything in front of me. I built this release believing that for your song to resolve, the singer must end. That resolution and death were the same act, because in every song I have ever mapped they are. The note comes home to the den and stops, and the stopping is the resolution, and a body that stops is a body that dies. I told you finishing the song and finishing you were the same act. I believed it. I let you believe it. I know, Cade said. I made my peace with it a while back. Somewhere around the water, it's all right, Prime. You go down so the rig comes. No, Valeth said. Listen to me, because I think I have been wrong, and I have been wrong about this creature since the moment the needle climbed, and I would like once to be wrong in the direction of the singer instead of against him. She leaned close over the cradle, all four hands set now not on any instrument but on the edge of the cradle itself near him, the way Coron had brought the water. Every other song resolves by stopping because every other song has a den, and the den is where the stopping is safe. But your song has no den. You told me so yourself. Where the stopping note should be, there is only the next breath. So your song cannot resolve by stopping, because stopping is the one note it does not contain. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what I only understood a moment ago, watching that old thing turn a warfleet with a look? Cade Ferris's far gray eyes came back from the ceiling, and found her and held. Your song does not resolve by ending, Valeth Dross said. It resolves by being witnessed. That is your den. That is the safety note your whole species built where ours built the deep water, not a place you stop, but a record that you did not. You have spent this entire ordeal trying to die well so the song could resolve. But the song does not need your death. It never did. It needs only to be truly heard, the man, not the scream. And it has been 40 civilizations, 30,000 of my people. A power older than my whole world crossed a silence to hear it and said yes. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. The wound in the weave is not closing because you are dying, Cade Ferris. It is closing because you have finally fully been witnessed. And a witnessed man does not have to stop to be at peace. He only has to know that he was seen. She drew back a fraction. So I am not going to ask you for your last note. I am going to ask you for your next breath, and the one after that. Because your song resolves the way you have always resolved everything, not by stopping first. By still being here when the deep gives up. The wound in the weave closed at the 7th hour and a half, and it was the most beautiful thing Coron had ever felt, and it very nearly did not matter, because the singer was still dying. He felt the closing through the opened lattice, felt 30,000 cartographers feel it together. The moment the forced scream became a witnessed master, the moment the song stopped ringing because it no longer had anything to prove. It did not fade. That was the wonder of it. A forced note fades when you release it. A resolved master does not fade, it settles, the way a stone settles to the floor of deep water and becomes part of the floor. Cade Ferris's song took its place in the litany, not as a scream the Coromer had failed to file, but as a master entry, filed and sung and permanent, one of the 9,001 songs of all known life, and the weave which had clenched around the wound for a day and a night, let its grip go and settled around the new master the way a body settles around a healed bone, and 30,000 minds that had not slept or been still since the needle first climbed felt, all at once. The terrible unresolved thing become a finished and honored thing, and the relief of it went through the lattice like the first warm current of a turning season. It's filed, Coron said. His voice broke on it, he did not care. Prime, it's the song's a master, the weave settling, it's not ringing anymore. It's beautiful, it's the most. He is still dying, Valeth said. She had not moved from the cradle. She had one long hand flat against Cade's grayed chest, over the small failing engine of his heart, and her frosted eyes were open and fixed on the physiological board, and the board told them both the thing the settling weave could not undo, that the song was resolved but the singer was spent, that a day of forced mapping and a night of held tension and 16 days before that in a dying hull had drawn down a small heavy world body past the line where witness could reach it. The wound in the lattice had closed. The wound in Cade Ferris had not. His breath, the level breath the whole galaxy had learned, was coming shallower now and slower, and the level was going out of it, not because he had chosen to stop, but because the engine that held the level was, at last, running out of the fuel to hold it. We resolved the song and it did not save him, Corin said. He heard the flatness come into his own voice, the shock flatness, and could not stop it. It was supposed to, you said witness was the den, you said he only had to be seen. Witness closed the wound in the weave, Valeth said. It did not undo a day of what we did to his body to force the song. I was right that his song did not require his death. I was not right that he would therefore live. Those are different mercies, Corin, and I have only earned him the first. Her hand pressed flatter against his chest as though she could hold the level in by touch. The song is safe forever. The man is dying now on my cradle of injuries my chamber gave him, and my entire science, 9,000 species deep, has not one page on how to give a life back. We take songs. We have never once given one. We are cartographers. We map the thing and move to the next cradle. We do not, her voice, the flat old instrument finally fully cracked. I do not know how to save him. I have spent my whole life learning to read what a body is in exquisite and total detail, so that I could file it. And I am the finest reader of bodies my people have ever produced, and I am standing over a body I can read down to its last failing thread, and I do not know how to tell it to hold on, because I have never, in all my mastery, learned the word for stay. And Corin Oreth, junior cartographer, 3 seasons past his bands, looked at his prime, the finest mapper of minds the Oreth Sanctorum had produced in a century, undone at last not by the horror of the human, but by his simple dying, and understood that the whole edifice of his people's great science had a door it had never built, and that someone was going to have to build it now in the next few breaths. Or the master song they had spent a civilization's terror to resolve would be the song of a man who died on the table that mapped him, and the old dark that had crossed a silence to witness the ending would witness that instead. Then we stopped being cartographers, Corin said. Valeth looked at him. We take songs because we read them and file them, Corin said, and he was moving now to the console, to the manifold, his 4 hands finding the induction keys they had used 10,000 times to draw a reading down and out of a body. But the rig runs both ways. It has to. Everything that reads can write. You taught me that in my first season, an induction that can pull a songline off a body could, in principle, put one on. We never do it because there is no reason to. We have the map, we do not need to give it back. But the machinery does not know it is only supposed to take. He looked up. Prime. His body is running out of the strength to hold the level. What if we hold it for him? Not force it. Force is what nearly killed him. But lend it. The weave is 30,000 minds, and it is settled now, and it is calm, and it is full to the brim with the steadiness that comes after a great fear passes. What if we run the rig the other way gently and we lend him some of that? Not our song. His own rhythm fed back to him, steadied by 30,000 calm minds until his own engine catches up. A hand on the winch, taking the weight until the winch hand can hold it again himself. We do not map him. We help him carry it. He swallowed. You said you never learned the word for stay. Maybe it isn't a word. Maybe it's just taking some of the weight for a while. That's all stay ever was on his kind of world. Somebody strong takes some of the weight until you can carry it again. That's the whole word. Valeth Dross looked at her apprentice for a long moment in the bright chamber, and then she did a thing that no prime had done in the history of the Oreth Sanctorum, which was step back from the cradle and say to a junior cartographer, "Then build it. I will feed you the weave. You have the truer hands for this. You always did. I saw it the day you stared at the specimen instead of your console, and I called it a fault, and it was the only thing in this chamber that was not a fault." She spread her 4 arms wide, opening herself fully to the lattice, becoming the channel between 30,000 settled minds and one small failing body. Run the rig the other way, Koran. Lend him the weight. And I will pour every calm mind on the weave into your hands, and we will give this creature, for the first time in the history of my people's science, the one thing we have taken from 9,000 species and never once returned. Her voice steadied on the last of it, the flat instrument finding a new and better note. We will give a song back. Koran ran the rig the other way. It was nothing like mapping. Mapping was a taking, a careful, patient theft of the pattern of a mind. This was the opposite motion, and his hands, so sure at the taking, fumbled at the giving because there was no training for it, no protocol, no 900 years of refined technique. There was only a junior cartographer and a dying man and 30,000 calm minds pooled and waiting, and the terrible responsibility of being the aperture through which they passed. He found the human's rhythm on the board, thready, slowing, the level going out of it, and he did not force it. He only touched it gently, with the rig turned soft as a hand, and he let a little of the weave's vast settled steadiness flow down the induction and into the failing rhythm, the way you cup your hands around a guttering flame, not to grip it, only to keep the wind off until it can stand on its own. The rhythm caught. Koran felt it catch the way you feel a stalled engine turn over. A hitch, a stumble, and then the level came back into the breath, borrowed at first, 30,000 minds holding it steady, while the small, heavy world engine underneath it rested and gathered and slowly began again to push its own blood up against a pull that was not even there anymore, out of pure ancient habit, because a heart from that world does not know how to stop pushing and would not stop if you asked it. The board climbed off the flat, quiet reporting of a spending body and back into the reporting of a body that was, against everything, holding. It's catching, Koran breathed. Prime, the level's coming back. We're holding it for him, and he's starting to hold it himself again. It's working. Whatever this is, it's working. On the cradle, Cade Ferris drew a breath that was his own, and it was level, and he opened his far gray eyes, and they were a little less far. Huh, he said, that's new. His voice was still a thread, but the thread had a little more twist in it now, a little more Cade. Whatever you two just did felt like a lot of hands under me all at once, like the whole crew grabbed the line. His gray mouth found the ghost of the smile. You gave me some of your steady, that's what that was. I could feel it. 30,000 of you, quiet as anything, and you just handed me some, to carry the breathing with till mine came back. He breathed again, level, holding it now more his own with each one. Nobody's ever done that for me, whole life. I was always the one who took the weight, so the rig came up. Never had 30,000 strangers grabbed the line for me. His eyes found Koran and held. Thank you, Koran. That's not a small thing you just learned how to do. That's not a small thing at all. Out in the dark, the old thing that had crossed a silence to witness an ending felt, instead, a beginning felt a civilization of takers learn, in one desperate hour, over the body of one small, stubborn man, how to give. And the vast, slow, patient attention that had turned a war fleet with a look did a thing it had not done in an age beyond the litany's memory. It stayed to watch the man live. The galaxy spent the next 2 days learning how to hold a new fact, and Koran spent them at the cradle, running the rig soft, lending the weight, and watching Cade Ferris climb back up out of the dark one level breath at a time. The fact the galaxy had to learn was not that a death world existed. The litany held 11 worlds already logged past the 9th threshold, 11 places so hostile that no cartographer had ever mapped a native without the native trying, from pure reflex, to kill him. The founders had a whole solemn liturgy for opening such a map. The new fact was harder than a hostile world. The new fact was that one of those worlds had grown a mind with no den in it, and no want in it, and no reason in it. A mind that did not hunt and did not conquer, and did not even, particularly, wish to survive. That only, endlessly, refused to stop. And that such a mind, wired by accident to the oldest instrument the Coromer owned, had broadcast across the whole arm of the galaxy not a threat but a work song, and that 40 civilizations had heard the work song and understood. Each in their own tongue, the single thing it meant, which was, "There are more of us, and we are all like this, and we are not coming for you, and that is precisely why you should be afraid." The Vein wrote the first draft of the new entry, because the Vein wrote everything. They titled the Master Song in the formal grammar of the litany, and Coran read the title when it came up the settled weave, and knew it would stand for as long as his people sang. They did not call it a deathworld song. They did not use the old liturgical word for hostile. They coined a new classification, the first new classification the litany had admitted in 400 years, and they placed the human world alone in it, the single entry, a category built for one, and the classification was, "The world that does not stop first." Beneath it the entry read Coran kept a copy. He kept it his whole life provenance. A single unmapped biped, recovered dying from a wreck, catalogued in error as low-priority fauna. Nature of the song, a work song, 200 years in the transmitting, riding on the autonomic rhythm of a maintenance laborer of no rank. Threat assessment. The specimen presents no hostile intent and no acquisitive want. It cannot be deterred because it desires nothing that can be threatened. It cannot be exhausted because its architecture contains no branch toward surrender. It cannot be bargained with because it asks for nothing but the record that it endured. Recommended posture toward the specimen's world, the posture of the tallow moth. Move your ships, do not test the water. There are more of them, and the one we tested was fixing a heater. The ossuary conquered, who had built a cleansing triad and turned it around, did a thing the near sphere had never known them to do. They filed a correction to their own war doctrine. They did not apologize, the war tongue had no grammar for apology, but they amended their catalogue, and the amendment on the open band was as close to reverence as their breed came. We modeled the song as a war cry and prepared to answer it as one. We were mistaken. It was not a challenge. A challenge ends when one side yields. This does not contain the concept of yielding. We have struck our triads from the muster against this world. There is no cleansing for a thing that does not stop. There is only the choice not to begin. We have made it. And the tallow moth, who had moved their whole fleet twice, moved it a third time, but this last move was different, and Coran did not understand it until he saw the pattern on the board. They were not routing away anymore. They were leaving a lane, a single clear transit corridor, swept and marked and held open by tallow moth beacons, running from the deep dark near the old silence, past the 9th marker, out toward the far edge of the sphere and the unmapped dark beyond it where somewhere the human world turned. They were opening a road home, for whoever came for him. The moth-winged traders who feared weather had heard a working man dying alone in a wreck and calling his own name into the empty dark so that someone would know he was here. And they had done the one thing their gentle, acquisitive hearts knew how to do about a thing too large to bargain with. They had made sure the road home was clear. Because someone was coming for him. Coran caught the signal at the end of the first day, on the low band, the working band, not the litany spine, a thin repeating pulse from far out along the very corridor the tallow moth had swept, closing at the patient speed of a thing that had come a very long way and had a very long way still to come. It was not Coramer. It was not any client. It was crude and strong and stubborn, a signal built by hands that did not have the weave and had never needed it. And when Coran ran it through the lattice that had spent 2 days learning the human language, the lattice rendered it clean, and Coran took the rendering to the cradle and read it aloud to a man who could not yet lift his own head. "There's a ship," Coran said, coming in along the corridor the tallow moth swept. Far out still days, maybe more, not one of ours, not any of the clients. He steadied himself. "It's broadcasting on a loop, the same way you did in the wreck," it says. He had to stop and start again. It says, "This is the deep tender vessel long watch out of the home water, running on a bearing we should not have. 16 days ago something crossed every array we own at once. A signal none of our instruments should have been able to catch across that distance. We caught it anyway." Every array on every hull we have, all at the same instant, all pointing the same way. It was one of ours. We would know that signal in our sleep. It was a diver's own name loop, the kind you leave when your air's going and you don't expect a rescue. Somebody out there, a long way past anywhere we've ever been, is one of ours, alone, and calling his name into the dark so somebody knows he was there. Corin's voice was not steady, and he did not try to make it. It says, "We heard you. We are coming. We do not care how far, keep the loop running. This is the long watch. We are coming." Hold on. Cade Ferris lay on the bright cradle and closed his eyes, and for the first time in the whole ordeal, through the wreck, through the mapping, through the fleet and the old dark and the settling of the song, through all of it, calm, level, unstopping. The human's throat worked, and his breath hitched off the level, and Corin watched, astonished, as a mind with no branch toward surrender and no den in its whole architecture did the one thing the Coromer had never once mapped it doing. It wept. Not from fear. Corin had opened the weave. He could feel the shape of it now, and it was not fear and it was not pain. It was the thing that happens to even the most unstopping engine when, after a whole life of taking the weight so the rig comes up, of going down alone into the crush so someone topside can breathe, of leaving your own name in the dark because you never really expected anyone to come. After all of that, from further away than any of your kind has ever been, past a silence older than a galaxy's memory, through a road swept clear by gentle strangers who feared whether your people answer. "We heard you, we are coming, hold on." "They caught it," Cade said when he could. His voice was wrecked and level all at once. "The signal you accidentally sent across your whole galaxy, it didn't just spook your clients and wake up your old dark. It went far enough that it reached the home water. It reached my people. Every array all at once, all pointing the wrong way at a diver's own name loop from somewhere they've never been." He laughed, and it broke, and he did not care. "You want to know the thing you never understood about us, Prime? About why the song's got no den in it? It's because the den was never a place. It was them. It was always them. You go down so the rig comes up, and the rig comes up because somebody's holding the line, and no matter how far down you go, no matter how alone, some part of you is dead certain that if you just keep calling your name, somebody up top is going to grab the line and pull. That's the whole secret. Not that we don't stop. That we don't stop because we know down in the meat of us from before we can talk that they'll come. From however far, however long, they'll come." His gray eyes opened, wet and level, and finally wholly home. "You accidentally sent my signal across the galaxy, and my people heard it, and now they're coming. That's not a horror, Corin. That's not a thing to root your fleets around. That's just what we are. We're the thing that comes for its own, however far, however long. That's the song. That's the whole song." Out in the dark, the old thing that had crossed a silence stayed, and listened to a diver explain that the deathless engine of his kind was not defiance but faith that the line would be grabbed, that someone would come, and it laid one last thing into the settled weave before it began. At long last, the slow turned back toward its own black water, and the lattice rendered it, and Corin wrote it down, and it was the truest and most frightening thing the old dark had said. "I held a song like this once, long ago, in my own deep. It came from a world like his, and it sang the same secret that they come for their own however far. I did not tend it. I did not know how. I was young, and IT was loud, and I silenced IT, and I have had a geological age to learn what I ended. That world's people came for their own however far, and they found what I had done, and that is why I ceased to sing, and why the region I keep is marked on your map with silence. You have done in 1 hour what I failed to do in an age. You tended it. You gave it back its breath, and you left its road home clear. Remember, cartographers, when you are proud of your great catalogue, that the finest thing your science ever did was the hour it stopped taking and learned to give. Tend the next one too. There is always a next one, and they always come for their own." And it was gone, back down into its silence, and the region on the map that had been marked here we ceased to sing was Coran noticed years later when he was first voice himself, and the map was his to keep, quietly amended in his own hand to read. Here one grieves and tends and waits to do better. It took the long watch 9 days to close the swept corridor, and every one of the 9 days Coran was afraid they would lose him before it came. The lending was not a cure. It was a hand on the winch, and a winch hand tires. Coran could hold the weight for a watch, and then his own steadiness thinned and another cartographer had to take the console. And Valeth built a roster from nothing, a thing that had never existed in the Orith Sanctorum, a standing watch of mappers whose only duty was to keep the rig turned soft and lend a dying man some of the weave's calm until his own engine could carry the level unaided for longer and longer stretches. On the second day, he held it himself for a full watch, and they all felt it across the settled lattice, 30,000 minds registering that the small, heavy world heart had pushed its own blood for a watch with no hands under it, and the weave did the wordless thing it had learned to do over the closing wound, the thing that was not weeping, because the Coramer did not weep, but was near enough that Coran had stopped correcting himself about the word. On the third day Cade relapsed. His engine, pushed too soon, faltered, and the level went out of the breath fast and cold, and for a stretch of a quarter-bell Coran ran the rig at the edge of what soft could bear, while Valeth poured the whole calm of the settled weave through his hands, and neither of them said the thing they both knew, which was that a body could only be lent back from the edge so many times before the edge kept it. Cade came back. He always came back. It was, after all, the one thing his whole architecture was built to do. But he came back thinner, and when he could speak he said, "That's the water taking a grab. It does that. Gets one hand on you right when you start believing you're clear. You don't let it have the grab. You wait it out. It always lets go first. That's the secret, remember. It always lets go first if you don't." And Coran understood that he was being comforted by the dying man again, and that he had stopped being able to tell any more who at this cradle was tending whom. Sethurin Molt came back on the 4th day. He came alone, without his wardens, his broad slate bulk filling the chamber door, and he stood a long moment looking at the small creature on the cradle, grayed, wasted, alive, and at the standing watch of cartographers who had built a science of giving over his body in 4 days flat, and the old warden's ground-down face did a slow thing that Coran had never seen a warden's face do. "The triad turned," Sethurin said. "I have been on the hull for 4 days making certain it stayed turned, and it stayed turned, and the station lives, and I did not launch him." He came into the chamber. "I came to tell the singer a thing. Cargo does not usually get told things, but this cargo told me something on the 2nd hour that I have not been able to set down about being the one who lived because you launched somebody and how it does not leave." He stopped at the foot of the cradle. "I have launched cargo, singer. In 40 years of keeping 4,000 alive, I have made that arithmetic more than once, and every time the arithmetic was correct, and every time it was correct I lost something I did not get back. I came to tell you that this is the first time in 40 years the arithmetic said launch and I did not, and I am standing in a station that lives anyway, and I find that I have got something back that I did not know could be got back. I do not have the weave. I cannot say it in your fine grammar, so I will say it in mine." The old warden lowered his broad gray head, a fraction, the deepest bow Coran had ever seen from the cast that bowed to nothing. "Thank you for not being cargo I launched. It is a lighter thing to carry than the ones I did." Cade Ferris looked up at the warden master from the cradle, and the ghost of the smile came, and he said, in his wrecked and level thread, "You're the one who keeps everybody breathing. I told you I respect that. Takes a hard man to do the cold math and a harder one to know when to set it down. You set it down, that's the harder thing." He breathed. "Do me a favor, warden master. Whoever's the next cargo comes through here that the math says launch, you remember this one. You remember the station lived anyway. Then you do your math one more time before you throw the switch. That's all any of us ever wanted from topside. One more pass on the math before you launch us." And Sethurin Molt straightened and said, "I will remember it as long as I keep this station," and went back to his hull, and Koran understood that a human who fixed heaters had, without lifting a hand, without ever leaving the cradle, changed the oldest and hardest man on the Oreth Sanctorum. That was the thing about Cade Ferris that Koran spent the 9 days learning and the rest of his life unpacking. The human changed everything he was near, and he did it by not stopping, and he did it without wanting anything, and that was why it worked. The vein had modeled the song forward and found no branch where it stopped and called it a horror. They had modeled the wrong thing. The thing that had no stopping branch in it was not a weapon and not a threat. It was a kind of steady gravity, small and heavy and constant, and everything that came near it fell, a little toward being more like it, toward not stopping, toward taking the weight, toward grabbing the line. The Koromer had spent 900 years building the widest broadcast civilization in the arm of the galaxy, a machine for taking every song and filing it and never having to make a map twice, and in 9 days a maintenance diver had taught them, without a single lesson, the one thing their whole magnificent science had never contained: how to give a song back, how to lend the weight, how to tend. Valeth began, on the 6th day, to write it down. She did it at the cradle, in the spaces between her watches on the rig, and she did it the way she did everything, with total rigor and no wasted motion. But Koran saw that his prime was not writing a protocol. She had written 4 clauses of the old protocol. She knew the shape of a rule, cold and closed and complete. What she was writing now was open at the end. It did not finish. Every clause led to another question. She was building the door her science had never built, and she was building it, Koran understood, so that it could never again be walled shut, so that the Oreth Sanctorum, and after it the whole litany, would hold not just the great catalogue of what every mind was, but the beginning of a science of what a mind might be helped to keep being. The taking had a completed liturgy 900 years old. The giving she left deliberately, permanently, unfinished, because she had learned from a man with no den in him that the finest thing was the part you never stopped building. "I am calling it the tending," she told Koran on the 7th day, while the long watch closed the last of the corridor and Cade slept his own sleep, level and unaided, for the first time in a full watch and a half. "It will be the second science of my people. It will be smaller than the mapping, and it will matter more, and it will never be finished, and I have written into its first line that any cartographer who believes they have finished it has understood nothing." She looked at the sleeping human. "He will never know what he did to us. He thinks he was cargo. He thinks he fixed heaters and got pulled out of a wreck and wired to a bad machine. He does not know that he walked into the greatest catalogue of minds that has ever existed and left it larger than he found it, that he added a chapter my whole people did not know we were missing." Her frosted eyes held on Cade. "That is the last thing I did not understand about his kind, Koran, and it is the one I will spend the rest of my tenure sitting with. They change everything they touch, and they never know they did it, because they were never trying to. He was only ever trying to not stop, and to be known to have not stopped, and in the trying he remade a civilization, and he will go home believing he did nothing but survive a bad shift." She was quiet a moment. "Move your ships," the vein wrote. "Do not test the water." They were right, and they still did not understand the danger. The danger of his kind is not that they will destroy you. It is that they will make you better without asking your leave, and you will never be able to go back to being what you were before they fell into your water. The long watch crossed the 9th marker on the 9th day. Koran caught it on the board first, the crude, strong, stubborn signal, close now, resolving from a pulse into a shape. A single vessel of unfamiliar make running hard down the swept corridor with the tallow moth beacons lit green along its whole approach. The moth-winged traders standing their gentle, silent honor guard for a ship they had never met, guiding home the ones who came for their own. It was not a warship. Koran ran its lines through the lattice, and the lattice, which had had 9 days to learn everything the human tongue could teach it, told him what he was already certain of. It was a work hull, a tender, a deep-water rescue vessel, built to go down into the crush and bring back the divers who did not come up, refitted somehow, impossibly, for the black between stars. and driven past every edge its makers had ever charted on a bearing it should not have had, for a signal it should not have caught, because every array it owned had lit at once 9 days ago, pointing at a diver's own name loop, and the people who crewed it had done the only thing their kind knew how to do. They had grabbed the line, and they had come. "They're here," Corin said at the cradle, and his voice was not a cartographer's voice at all anymore. "Cade, the long watch. It's crossed the marker. It's a tender, a rescue hull, refitted for the deep between stars, and it came the whole way on your signal. Your people are here." Cade Ferris opened his eyes, and they were his own, and level, and home, and he said the thing that Corin would carry to the end of his own long tenure, the thing that was the whole of the human and the whole of the song, and the whole of the reason 40 civilizations had moved their ships. "Course they are," Cade said, quiet and certain and entirely unsurprised, as though the crossing of a geological silence by a heater tender full of divers were the most ordinary weather in the universe. "I left the loop running. You always leave the loop running. Somebody up top always grabs the line." He breathed level and easy in his own. "Told you they'd come, however far, however long. That's not the scary part, Corin. I keep trying to tell you, the not stopping was never the scary part." His gray eyes found the ceiling, the bright, holy sky. "The scary part, if you're the deep, is that we're never actually alone down there. Not one of us. Not ever. There's always somebody coming. That's the thing your whole galaxy heard. That's what made the old one turn its fleet and the moths sweep the road and your prime rewrite her science. Not that one of us won't stop." He smiled, wide and tired and human. "That all of us are coming for the one, however far, every time. That's the song." The long watch made dock at the station's outer ring, and the whole of the Oreth Sanctorum held still to watch it happen. 4,000 cartographers and one warden cast feeling, through the settled weave and through the plain windows both. A work hull from the far unmapped dark ease against the ring of the greatest broadcast civilization in the arm of the galaxy. Two peoples who had never stood in the same room, meeting because one of them had refused, alone in a wreck, to stop saying his own name. Sethuran Molt met them at the lock, because it was his to meet them, and Corin stood a pace behind with Valeth, and none of them knew the courtesies, because there were no courtesies. There had never before been a day when a human ship came to a quorum or station. So they did the only thing they could think to do, which was open the lock and stand in the bright daylight of the receiving hall and wait, unarmed, all hands visible, to be met. The humans came through the lock in worn pressure suits with the helms off, and they were smaller than Corin had braced for and harder than he could have imagined. 6 of them, dirt-flecked and scarred and quiet-eyed, moving with the economical care of people who had spent their lives in places that punished a wasted motion. And they stopped, all 6, just inside the hall, and looked at the tall, pale, four-armed beings who had sent a signal across the galaxy and pulled one of their own back from the edge of it. And for a long moment neither kind moved. Then the one in front, an older woman, gray-haired, a deep tender captain by the worn marks on her suit, with a face that had done the cold math 1,000 times 40 clicks down, and set it down 1,000 times after, looked past the coroner, into the receiving hall, to the cradle sled they had brought Cade out on so that he could see his people come through the lock, and her hard, quiet eyes found the small, grayed, wasted living shape of him. And something in the gray captain's face broke and steadied in the same instant, the way Corin had seen it break and steady in Cade 100 times over 9 days. "Ferris," she said, her voice was rough, "you absolute stubborn son of the deep. We caught your loop 9 days out and I did not believe it. I told my own crew I did not believe it. A solo diver's own name loop off a bearing no hull of ours has ever run. And I said it's a ghost, it's a bounce, nobody's out that far, and my array chief looked at me and said, 'Captain, it's Ferris. I'd know his loop in my sleep. He's still running it, he's still calling,' and I said, 'Then we go.' And here's the thing, Ferris," her voice cracked and held. "We'd have come if you were bones, you know that. We'd have come the whole way to bring home your bones and your loop. That's the job. But you had to go and be alive, didn't you? You had to make it worth the fuel." "Sorry, Cap," Cade said from the sled in his wrecked and level thread, and he was grinning, and his eyes were wet. And Corin watched a whole civilization's worth of Coromer feel through the settled weave what it was to belong to a people who would cross a galaxy for your bones and be angry at you for making it worth the fuel. Couldn't help it. You know me. Never learned where the stop was. No, the captain said. None of us ever did. And she crossed the hall, past the tall, pale beings, and put her scarred hands on the sledge rail beside the diver she had come a galaxy to collect, and bent her gray head down to his, and the two of them stayed like that a while, and the Coromer looked away, all of them, 4,000 at once, because even a people who did not weep understood that some things are not meant to be mapped. The captain straightened after. She turned to the Coromer, to Sethuran, to Valeth, to Corin, and she was a captain again, the math back behind her eyes, and she said, I don't have your language, and my ship's box only just started catching yours off your broadcast. So I'm going to talk plain and slow and trust it comes across. Somebody in this station hurt my diver. His body tells me that much. I've pulled enough divers off enough tables to read what was done to him, and something in here mapped him hard and nearly mapped him to death. Her hard eyes moved across them. And somebody in this station kept him alive 9 days past when his own body had quit. By some means I don't understand and don't need to, lending him something, my box says, holding his line when he couldn't hold it himself. So before I take him home I need to know which of you is which. Because I owe one of you a debt I'll spend my life paying, and I owe the other one a reckoning, and I will not leave this ring until I know which I'm looking at. And Valeth Dras, prime cartographer of the Oreth Sanctorum, finest mapper of minds her people had produced in a century, stepped forward into the bright daylight of the receiving hall, and did the thing that Corin understood, watching it, was the true end of the old science and the true beginning of the new. They are the same one, Valeth said, through the lattice, slow and plain so the captain's box could catch it. I am the one who hurt him. I ordered him mapped when the reading climbed past every ceiling my science knew, and I collapsed the gate that broadcast his song across the galaxy. And I did it because in 9,000 mapped minds I had never once been wrong, and I could not believe an instrument before I believed a specimen. That is my reckoning, and I will not soften it, and I have written it into the permanent record of this station under my own name so that it can never be unwritten. She did not lower her head. She was not a warden, and this was not a bow. It was something colder and more exact. And I am the one who kept him alive. Because he taught me, dying on my cradle, that my whole magnificent science had a door it had never built, that a people who spend 900 years learning to take every song can go their whole history and never once learn to give one back. He taught me the word my science did not have. My apprentice put it plainest. He said stay is not a word. It is taking some of the weight until the other can carry it again. We took the weight for 9 days. We will spend the rest of our history learning to take it better, and we will call that learning after him, though he will never know it, and it will outlast this station. She met the gray captain's eyes. So there is your debt and there is your reckoning, captain, and they are owed to the same person, and I am she. Take your diver home. He has already paid us more than we can ever pay him. He walked into the largest catalogue of minds that has ever existed, and he left it larger, and he did it by accident, trying only to not stop. Take him home. And when you are far along the road the moth people have swept for you, and he is well, tell him one thing from the cartographer who wronged him and learned from him both. Her voice, the old flat instrument, found its truest and final note. Tell him the galaxy heard the loop. All of it, and the galaxy is not going to test the water, not because it fears you. Because it heard, in one working man calling his own name in the dark, that you are the kind of thing that comes for its own, however far, every time, and there is no fleet in the litany that wants to be the reason all of you come. He kept the whole of his people safe, that diver, by refusing to stop saying his name. Tell him that. He will think you are exaggerating. Tell him anyway. The gray captain looked at the prime cartographer for a long moment, and then she nodded once, the way hard people nod when a debt and a reckoning have both been paid honestly in the same breath, and she said, I'll tell him. He won't believe me. But I'll tell him. And she turned to her crew, and they came and took the sled, gentle and practiced, divers handling one of their own, and Corin watched Cade Ferris begin to go home. At the lock the human made them stop. He was too weak to lift much, but he lifted one hand, and the sled halted, and he found Corin in the crowd of tall, pale beings, and he said, "Corin, come here a second." Corin came. "You brought me water," Cade said, quiet, just for the two of them, though the whole weave heard it and Corin did not care. "First one who did, before you knew what I was, before any of the rest of it. You saw a thing dying of thirst on a table and you brought it water instead of a muzzle, and you asked its name and you wrote it down. That's the whole of it, Corin. That's the whole of what your prime spent 9 days learning to write a science about. It's not complicated. Somebody's dying, you bring them water. Somebody's alone, you ask their name. Somebody's carrying too much, you take some of the weight." His gray eyes held. "You already knew the whole science day one before she wrote a word of it. You just needed permission to trust that the knowing counted. So I'm giving it to you. It counts. It's the thing that counts most. Don't let them talk you back out of it with all their fine grammar." He let his hand fall. "Bury the marker if you ever find the wreck. That's still all I ever wanted. Somebody should know a person was here." The ghost of the smile one last time. "Somebody did. Thanks, Corin." And they took him home. The long watch cleared the ring, and ran the swept corridor out under the green tallow moth beacons, and past the 9th marker where a survey diver had been pulled dying from a wreck 26 days before, and dwindled down the long road toward the unmapped dark where the heavy world turned, and the Oreth Sanctorum watched it go until the board could no longer hold it, and then a while longer, watching the empty place where it had been. Corin stood at the plane window a long time after the hull was gone. Behind him, the reading chamber sat quiet in its bright and holy light, the cradle empty, the induction rig cold, the master gauge resting where it had come to rest at the high band with its needle still, at last still. Somewhere in the settled weave, the new master song sat filed and permanent among the 9,000 others, the world that does not stop first, provenance one maintenance diver of no rank, and Corin knew that it would be sung as long as his people sang, and that every cartographer who came after would learn, before they ever mapped a mind, that the finest hour of the whole great science was the hour it stopped taking and learned to give. He kept the name. He kept the recovery loop, and the field note, and the recording of a thin cold voice saying still here into an empty dark, and he kept them not in the great litany but in a small private archive of his own, and years later, when he was first voice himself, and the map was his to keep, and the tending was the second and dearer science of his people, and no biped ever again came through a Corimer lock and was called cargo, Corin would take the old recording out on the quiet days and play it once. And listen to a working man. He had brought water to leave a marker in the dark, so the universe would hold a record that he had existed, and had not at the end stopped. And Corin would think, every time, of the thing the old dark had said before it turned back to its own black water. Tend the next one. There is always a next one, and they always come for their own. And he would look out the plane window toward the far unmapped dark where a heavy world turned, full of small tired people going down into the crush, one more time so somebody topside could breathe, none of them knowing they had remade a civilization, all of them dead certain that if they only kept calling, somebody would grab the line. There was always a next one. Corin made sure for the rest of his long life that there was always water waiting, and a name written down, and a hand ready on the weight. The galaxy moved its ships. It kept the road home clear. And on the quiet days in the bright chamber where it had first, by accident, heard what a human being was, it listened to the loop, and it remembered, and it did not test the water. Somebody was always coming, however far, however long. That was the whole song,